Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
A slender girl whirled through the hospitable open doors. She skipped the greeting and announced her hostess, who was not inferior to her in terms of figure. Adriana, get dressed quickly. In half an hour we'll begin viewing, and we still have to get there. Hey, Kelly, what are you doing? What screening? Where are we going? The guest, almost jumping from impatience, she actively gestured, as if trying to give her friend the necessary acceleration, and snidely interrogated. What viewing? Couldn't you ask anything smarter? Well, not cooking, dancing, of course. Let's move, there's less and less time left. Why are you so slow today, and don't you look fresh? All the more reason to get a move on. Express mask on your face or something. The hostess sighed and tried to explain the reason for her fatigue. Energetic Kelly and politely declined to participate in the viewing. Sorry, I'd rather rest at home. Grandma's not feeling well. My blood pressure in the morning was off the charts by the time I got home. I even had to call an ambulance. Just the other day, the general practitioner came by and wrote a bunch of tests that need to be taken. Tomorrow, I'll call a field lab for Grandma so she doesn't have to go to the clinic. So, Kelly, let me wish you luck, and I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. The guest twisted at the temple, showing that she thinks about her interlocutor. Are you trying to set me up, Adriana? I sent a video of our doubles performance to the preliminaries. After I got the message that I liked the dance, I submitted an official application to participate in the section of dance duets. A duet is two people. If I suddenly appear on stage alone, then maybe my number the jury will not even look at. Urgently looking for a partner is also a doubtful event. Adriana did not restrain her indignation and asked her friend directly. Shouldn't you have asked me if I want to perform and fight with competitors for unknown reasons? Seeing that Adriana was not giving in to flattery, Kelly changed her tone to a belittling one. Adriana, please, please, please. I don't ask you to do anything that often. You are our crowning program. Even if I wake you up in the middle of the night, you will do it perfectly. You and I are a perfect team. I can't find such a talented partner, even if I search for several years, especially since we have a little over 2 o'clock before the screening starts. An older woman came out of the room and said hello to the guest. Kelly, good afternoon. Hello, Miranda. Adriana perked up. Grandma, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well? The woman shook her head. I'm fine, Adriana. You've heard the doctor say that you should move around a little if your blood pressure is more or less within normal limits. I've just measured 130 over 95. It'll come down a bit, and you can go into space. I'll go to the kitchen and make some tea. The guest decided to influence her friend's grandmother and spoke. Miranda, how are you feeling? Maybe I can get some medicine while Adriana is getting ready? The woman smiled. Oh, Kelly, you were a foxy little fox, and you're still a foxy little fox. You don't need to go anywhere to get medicine. I've got everything I need. I'm sorry, girls, but I overheard bits of your conversation, but I wasn't listening. So why don't you tell me where you need Adriana to go so urgently? Kelly's voice sounded pitiful, almost tearful. To watch the dance competition, Miranda. It's practically a matter of life and death for me, and Adriana refuses. The woman looked carefully at Kelly, who folded her arms in a belittling gesture, shifted her gaze to her granddaughter, and looked her in the eye and asked, Sweetie, you should probably get some rest. I have tortured you with my old age illnesses. So girls, let's go and drink tea. I'm sure this won't be the last contest we'll have. Kelly knew it was useless to argue with her grandmother. The girl obediently dropped her shoes and headed to the bathroom to wash her hands. However, knocking in the palms of her hands fragrant foam, the girl did not stop thinking of arguments that would help to force her friend to keep her company at the contest. Sitting down at her long-established seat at the table at her best friend's house, Kelly turned to her grandmother again. "Miranda, you see, this contest isn't the most ordinary or passable. Winning it will be a chance to change your life. You see, even though it's a regional contest, the winners get to go to Paris. Frankly speaking, I understand that at the qualifying stage you have to shine so much to stand out from the crowd of talents. And then there will be training, and during it you will be able to work out the movement almost to perfection. The main thing for me is to pass the first round, but without Adriana it will be much more difficult to do it. Especially since I sent in my dude application. I apologize. I didn't consult her. It's my mistake, I admit. But I was acting with the best of intentions." Adriana grumbled, but not in a mean way. "You could have at least asked my opinion over the phone. We're in touch all the time, and you haven't even hinted at it once." Feeling that her friend was not angry, but grumbling only because she was a little hurt by her arbitrary decision to participate in the contest, Kelly continued her persuasion. "Miranda, Adriana has nothing to lose by going to this screening. She'll have the pleasure of dancing, practicing, warming up. If she doesn't catch fire with the idea, doesn't want to compete anymore, she may not participate in the project. I promise that after successfully passing the qualifying round, I will not insist on anything. I'll swear on anything. I just want to pass the screening. Please, Miranda, let Adriana come with me. Look how much better she looks already. The blush on her cheeks from the tea. Adriana, help me out." The girl turned to her friend. The persistent Kelly knew how to persuade. Adriana trembled and looked at her grandmother and asked, "Are you actually feeling okay? Or are you just trying to make me feel better?" The woman smiled. "I'm really fine." "Go, my soul, get ready, get some rest." Kelly clapped her hands and ran up to hug her friend's grandmother. "Thank you, Miranda. You are awesome. The coolest grandma in the world. Oh, Foxy." The woman smiled, and while her granddaughter was getting ready, began to ask her guest about her family's well-being. Soon Adriana announced to her friend that she was ready and the girls headed to the casting. They decided not to spend money on a cab. On the way to the place of the contest, Adriana involuntarily thought about the fact that, no matter how it was, it could not be otherwise. After all, how could she refuse her best friend, with whom they shared the joys and problems of more than half of their lives? The girls met at a children's sports camp. They were in different squads and almost did not communicate. But having gone through a curious situation, they became best friends. It was a passion for dancing that first became a reason for heightened competition, and later brought them closer together. On the level of prosperity, parents' girls were about the same level and could afford to pay for an expensive hobby. Adriana and Kelly studied in prestigious choreographic studios in the city, but in different neighborhoods, and went to training with sincere pleasure. During the summer vacation, both girls missed their favorite activity, so when a talent contest was announced at the camp, they decided to participate. Of course, each of them prepared to perform a dance number. The camp management provided a place for practicing to all comers, of which, however, there was not much. The time when they opened a separate one-story building with a hall and a stage was limited. So unwillingly, the participants knew quite well what their opponents would emphasize. Not to say that Kelly practiced in her choreography studio, but she jealously noted when performing some elements she is far from Adriana. In addition, practiced rivals with full dedication, even outside of rehearsals. Adriana was immersed in her thoughts. She walked along the paths for a long time, then stopped, wrote something in a small notebook, and went on. No matter how hard Kelly tried, she could not see what Adriana was writing down. The day of the contest came very quickly. There was literally no empty space in the hall. After all, to be honest, there was not much entertainment in the camp. According to the draw, Adriana was chosen to perform right after the magician, who opened the talent parade. Going on stage, the girl brilliantly began her performance with a familiar song. However, when the first lines of the second verse were heard from the speakers, the music stopped. There was silence in the hall. Only the girl on the stage acted as if nothing had happened and continued her dance. She managed to look into the hall as before, so it seemed that she looked into the soul of every spectator. Adriana's lips were moving slightly. Apparently, she did not hum the song loudly after all, helping herself not to get lost in the dance. It was fantastically beautiful. The silence was suddenly broken by a lone voice from somewhere from the last rows, singing the popular lines aloud. Then other spectators joined the unknown soloist. Soon almost the entire hall, including not only teenagers but also a large part of the staff, was singing the familiar lines. One of the contestants, who was standing with a guitar backstage waiting for his exit, began to play the melody on the instrument. As she spoke, Adriana made several deep curtsies to each side of the room, as if there were important people there, as well as to her unintentional accompanist from backstage. Smiling, she sent air kisses to everyone, and at that moment the applause rang out. As a result, the first prize was awarded to Adriana. The silver prize winner was a young man who played guitar perfectly and won many hearts. The honorable third place went to Kelly. She didn't seem to be upset. She found the strength to congratulate those who had beaten her. Thanking the jury and the audience, that same night, after eliminations, Kelly went to Adriana's cabin and called her in to talk. The winner did not refuse. At Kelly's suggestion, they retreated to the dining room so that, she said, they could not be overheard by nosy neighbors, and sat down on a bench. The silence lingered, and Adriana asked, "What did you want? Speak quickly, because I'm tired. I'm falling off my feet." "Anyway, I just wanted to admire your performance. You were great, you were great. You handled an unconventional situation very well. You didn't get confused and danced everything without a hitch." Adriana was pleased with the praise from a peer who knew about dancing, and she confessed, "In general, this merit is not entirely mine. Our coach once told us that at any level of competition we should be ready for anything." She gave an example of how once at the World Figure Skating Championships in the early 70s, one of the pairs performing was in a terrible situation. The musical accompaniment, while performing the program, simply turned off. However, the skaters, with a squeak, cutting the ice with their skates, continued to perform the elements as if nothing had happened. The secret was that they were practicing with a metronome at the insistence of their coach. The whole pattern of the dance, or I don't remember exactly how they call the sequence of elements, was subordinated to a strict rhythm, calculated by seconds, and the absence of music in the middle of the performance was not a disaster. It was certainly much more difficult for them than for me today. Can you imagine the difference in the scale of the competition? Plus, no one was singing along. I had that inspirational example in my mind today too, and their incredible support from the audience was palpable. Kelly was ecstatic. Challenging her rival to a meeting was originally just to find out her secret. Now she decided to become her friend. Adriana accepted the offer to socialize. They exchanged what they knew and even came up with a few dance routines. For the performance at the Parents' Day, the girls came up with a small number and thwarted a flurry of applause. Upon returning to the city, the girlfriends continued to socialize. Kelly even went to study in the studio, where Adriana practiced. As they grew up slim, young, perfectly dancing beauties invariably attracted attention at discos. The girls together entered the Institute of Culture and managed to reach the equator. When the happy, quiet life of Adriana collapsed overnight, her parents died in the family car. As soon as they drove a little away from the parking lot at the mall, the car flew into the air. Doctors were powerless to do anything. The girl was saved only by the fact that she did not feel very well that day and stayed at home. She didn't go shopping with her parents. She lay on the sofa under a warm woolen blanket and drank tea with lemon, trying to overcome her ailments as soon as possible. When Adriana saw her grandmother opening the door of her dead daughter's apartment with her own key, she realized that something irreparable had happened. Miranda hugged her granddaughter and whispered the sad news in her ear. The girl couldn't find her place. It seemed to her that if she had gone with her parents, she would have surely noticed something wrong and prevented the death of her loved ones. She tried not to upset her grandmother, but at times tears dripped from her eyes when something reminded her of her parents. Kelly became a real support for Adriana during that terrible period. She literally moved into Miranda's apartment, where a friend moved after the tragedy. Kelly did not let her grief wither her. She, almost by force, took her to the institute, forced at least something to eat. To the surprise of many neighbors and other people's gossip, the perpetrator involved in the massacre of Adriana's parents managed to detain. And the main merit belonged not to the law enforcement agencies, which, as if someone gave the order, not too active in the search for the criminal. Grandmother spared no money to punish not only the murderer, but also the customer of the massacre of the only adored daughter and son-in-law whom she respected and loved. Miranda sold her jewelry and carefully shielded her granddaughter from the details of the investigation and court cases. She seriously feared for Adriana. After all, her psychological state, even 6 months after the tragedy, was deplorable. As soon as the girl approached the house where the apartment was located, where she lived with her parents, as she began to have hysterics. Adriana could not forgive herself for staying alive. To return to the place where she was once happy, the girl refused flatly. Miranda didn't insist. It wasn't easy for her, and alone, she would probably have lost her mind. Her granddaughter and the punishment of criminals were her anchors to keep her sane. Adriana was holding on in part because of her grandmother, and not without Kelly's help, trying to continue living in her new reality. Her financial situation had taken a noticeable hit, and Miranda, after much deliberation, arranged a home council with her granddaughter. "Girl, I realize that we are going to have a difficult conversation, but I will not make important decisions without you. I know that the apartments are not thrown away, but to rent it to me, frankly, sorry. I'm afraid that instead of money, we'll end up with ruin. What do you think?" "Grandma, you're right. It's too hard for me to be there. I couldn't find a normal job yet, and I'm ashamed to sit on your neck." The woman hugged her granddaughter tightly. Glad that she did not cry during the short but emotionally heavy conversation, and began to help with the sale of her daughter's apartment. Throughout the tragic, difficult days, as the woman motored around town trying to get justice and dealing with other issues, Kelly supported her friend. She even tried to drag Adriana out to all sorts of recreational activities. It was to no avail. However, Adriana knew that Kelly had met some guy at one of the discos where she couldn't get her out, and now, making sure that her friend was in a relatively normal state, she spent all her free time with him. Adriana had a slip of resentment that it was as if Kelly was hiding her suitor from her. But she realized it all after another serious conversation with her grandmother. Once Miranda, who had aged dramatically after the tragic events, seeing her granddaughter looking sad over her notes, sat down opposite her and looking into her eyes spoke. "My girl, I know that you had to grow up very suddenly, but that's the way fate has it. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to tell you now. It's inevitable that you and Kelly are seeing less of each other. It was bound to happen one day. You can't be around her everywhere, or it's abnormal. You shouldn't be offended that she doesn't introduce you to her boyfriend. It's just quite easily explained. The way the world works is that love is always prioritized over friendship." Adriana objected indignantly. "I'm not going to steal Kelly's boyfriend." Grandmother smiled. "I didn't think so. Kelly probably doesn't suspect you of evil intentions either. But instinctively she's trying to spend more time with her boyfriend and keep you out of his meetings so that his attention isn't dissipated. Men are a windy people. Not all of them, of course, but alas, a great many. So I don't want you to take offense or be too trusting. I didn't tell you, but you have a right to know. Your parents, as it turns out, were massacred by people they considered good friends. Just remember that you can only trust yourself completely, unconditionally, and fully. Be especially careful when you fall in love. Happiness loves silence. The less we brag, the better." Adriana nodded, listening to her grandmother. Everything was falling into place. The resentment against her friend was evaporating like raindrops from hot asphalt. Adriana really carefully memorized all the words of the only native person. The girl had always admired her grandmother, and now she was a little ashamed that she had left her favorite relative unattended. Of course now, having almost reached the desired stop, it was silly to go back. All that remained was to perfectly fulfill her friend's request and get home faster. Scraps of triumphant, sad, and instructive memories managed to rush through Adriana's mind as they drove to the casting. Even before arriving at the venue, the girl's thoughts were interrupted by Kelly's enthusiastic monologue, anticipating success. "Very soon we will get our diploma, and then hello, a new life. Paris will have better prospects than our backwoods town." Adriana thought she was used to her best friend's ambition and spontaneous actions. But Kelly still managed to surprise her, and she objected, standing up for the good name of her hometown. "Kelly, you've got a nerve, calling our town of over 1 million people a backwoods town. That doesn't seem right. Besides, how's your boyfriend gonna feel about it? Something happened that had never happened in our many years of friendship." Kelly was embarrassed to hear such a question and to avoid answering it. She abruptly turned the conversation to the details of the upcoming performance. As they approached the contest venue, Adriana's misgivings became more and more prevalent. Judging by the fact that the line to the old building of the once former movie theater was thinly snaking almost halfway down the long stop, two things were becoming apparent. First, the competition looks like it's going to be stiff. Second, the casting was not organized in the best way. However, after the girls had been standing for about an hour among the same, eager to become famous in the field of dance, the line suddenly began to move much faster. When Kelly and Adriana finally waited for the moment of their performance, the reason for this sudden acceleration became clear. And barely they had time to perform a couple of movements as the person sitting in the center of the table in the jury shouted, "Well done, just bravo." "Enough. Wait, in the next room. We need to discuss the concept of further development of the duo. There's water, tea, healthy sweets, have a rest. A little later you'll be invited for an interview." Adriana didn't care, because she had agreed only to participate in the very initial stage at the insistence of her stubborn friend. But Kelly's hands were almost trembling. She was afraid to hear that the project did not need a dance duet. Adriana, sensing Kelly's excitement, whispered softly, "I think I've accomplished my mission. Now I can say that I refuse from further participation in the competition. Not to take the place of the girls who dream of getting into the project." Kelly's heart was relieved, and she entered the improvised waiting room with a great mood, provided by the support of her best friend. Before, when the building had been a movie theater, as it had been planned when it was built, it had been a cafe. So the atmosphere was nervous. A pretty middle-aged brown woman, who supervised the distribution of food and kept order, smiled sweetly at the contestants, poured tea and water. She offered candy and something similar to homemade marshmallows. Adriana refused the treat, but Kelly, having politely thanked Evelyn, as it was written on her badge, enjoyed the sweets and tea. Sipping her drink, she hissed to her friend, "What are you so shy about? This Evelyn is here for a reason, I think. She's probably watching and quietly observing which contestants have what kind of character, and whoever's going to be rude to her won't get any further than the qualifying round. Again, look how she looks at everyone carefully, especially if the girls are in a group. In dance groups, you know, like in astronauts, psychological compatibility is important. So she's noticing which group is more promising to form." Adriana marveled. "But you, Kelly, you're a consummate strategist." The girlfriend smiled. I am. I just can't imagine how much I want to get out of here and go to Paris. My parents are always nagging me. Study better, don't stay out late, eat well, or you're almost transparent." She mocked. Adriana kept silent so as not to cry. She was glad to have her mom and dad telling her what to do, and she desperately missed the times when the whole family was together. Fortunately, Adriana's painful conversation was interrupted. An acquaintance from the dance studio came over, and they chatted for a while, reminiscing about the past. The conversation helped to forget a little about the tense situation. The number of contestants in the hall did not decrease, and those who went to the room for the interview were replaced by new ones. Soon, Kelly and Adriana, an old friend of Kelly and Adriana's, were called in for an interview. And next the two of them were called into the room. In the room, sprawled on the couch, half lying, half sitting, was a man who from the first moment made the most unpleasant impression on Adriana. Mannerly from high, though looking at the girls from bottom to top, he, slightly stretching vowels, said, "I am the producer of this project. My name is Michael. I have to admit, honestly, I've been watching you move on the online camera, and it's impressive. You have a great duet, such cohesion, such harmony, and such plasticity. It's like you're moving without tension. I can see that you enjoy your performance, and that's very much appreciated. Anyway, I'm ready to make you a unique offer right now. I'll hire you at a club in the capital. At first, of course, there will be a trial period, but all the tips are yours. You'll have to learn a little bit, of course. We have our own specifics in this establishment, but I think you girls are talented, capable, and will easily cope." Adriana could not contain her surprise. What kind of tips can the members of a dance group have? Kelly, who already had a picture in front of her eyes of being applauded by a huge hall in the capital, suddenly also thought about her friend's quite adequate question. Michael laughed mannerly and explained, emphasizing the age of the contestants. "It seems that minors were not allowed to our casting. So where did this naivety come from all of a sudden, or did you decide to break comedy here? Why are you batting your eyelashes? You'll have to dance in a club, where the customers are generous and hot. The producer didn't name the job, which she probably was, but Adriana realized she had to get out of that room as quickly as possible. Taking Kelly under her arm, the girl correctly said goodbye. I'm sorry to have taken up your time, but we have to go." Contrary to fears, not Michael, no one or anyone else was holding the girls back. They quietly walked out of the former movie theater building into the street. The always cheerful Kelly shrank, realizing that she had almost got into a bad story, and Adriana cheered her up. "Don't worry, there'll be more normal auditions. In the meantime, let's get a cab. I'm really worried about Grandma." Kelly, who was feeling awkward, was uncomfortable to refuse, even though she had planned to give herself an extraordinary shopping spree to improve her mood. While the girls were in the cab, Adriana asked, "Kelly, let's not scare my grandmother with the truth about this fake casting. Let's just say it didn't work out. I mean, it's real, and she doesn't need to know the details." "Of course," immediately agreed friend. "I myself do not like to think that I was so easily fooled. You could have checked out the organizer's firm. Okay, I'll be smarter now. Thank you, Adriana, for coming with me." Adriana smiled at her friend, even though she was feeling a little sick to her stomach. She had left her grandmother alone for the sake of this cheating contest, and she would never forgive herself if something bad happened during that time. To the girls' great relief, everything was relatively fine with Miranda. However, the woman promised her granddaughter that she would soon undergo a full examination. "Do not worry, I will pass all the doctors." In the polyclinic at the place of residence, the queue to the cardiologist was scheduled for 3 months in advance. The neurologist was on vacation. There was no endocrinologist at all. In fact, only the therapist, ENT, ophthalmologist, and gynecologist worked. Adriana smiled sadly, remembering Kelly's speech about her hometown, and mentally agreed with her. A polyclinic in the center of town with no doctors almost. At the insistence of her granddaughter, who was worried about her health, Miranda had gone to a private pay clinic. Adriana was adamant. "Let's withdraw the money left from the sale of the apartment, but you will pass the doctors without such a long wait?" The woman only had to obey, and her epic with visiting the clinic, taking tests, and undergoing examinations began. Adriana, of course, asked her grandmother about the results, but in the hustle and bustle before graduation, she simply did not have time to study what was stated in the statements. Miranda cheerfully told her granddaughter that all the detected deviations from the norm were just senile changes, which angered Adriana. "Nonsense, you're always young." In fact, Miranda's health was not as rosy as she presented it to her granddaughter. In addition to her diagnosed diabetes mellitus, the cardiologist was concerned about her heart condition. The shallow woman didn't panic and checked the diagnosis elsewhere, then at another clinic. But all the doctors were unanimous. The condition was dangerous and surgery had to be prepared. Miranda diligently followed all the recommendations, and Adriana was happy to note that the feverish blush had disappeared from her grandmother's cheeks. The woman underwent the operation, and it seemed that a new happy period of life was ahead of her. After receiving their diplomas, Adriana and Kelly decided to open their own dance studio, where not only children, but also adults who decided to join dancing could come. The girls staked on an unusual approach. They offered visitors a mix of modern dances, as well as engaged in staging movements of couples to wedding compositions, using an idea from a movie once seen. In addition, Adriana decided that her free time would be spent sewing, learning from her grandmother. And because from the very beginning to promote the studio is not the fastest thing, and an extra penny saved or earned will not hurt. Surprisingly, needlework fascinated the girl, helping to distract from the troubles. Especially since Miranda was a patient and knowledgeable teacher and was happy to share with her granddaughter all the wisdom of which she knew a lot. After only a few months, Justifying the most daring hopes of the owners, the studio became a success. Of course, the net profit was still out of the question. But still, the idea was a success. Adriana was happy that she was doing what she loved, both at home and in the company of her best friend. Most of all warmed the soul of the girl thought that her grandmother now does not have to deal with the financing of their small family alone. Everything was fine for almost a whole year, and then Miranda was suddenly gone. The girl came home and saw her grandmother lying on the couch as if resting. She slowly approached to cover her with a plaid, because the apartment was quite cool, because the central heating had already been turned off and traditionally frost had returned. As soon as the girl came closer, a scream of horror burst out, it seemed, from the very depths of her soul. It was obvious that her grandmother would now no longer be safe from the cold. The excitement she had experienced had proved fatal to Miranda. In the turmoil of saying goodbye to her only relative, Adriana found her outlet in the studio. Dissolving in the movements and carefully watching the dancer, the girl drove away her pain. Kelly, who seemed to have everything fine, tried not to shine with happy eyes, so as not to annoy her friend. She came to visit her less and less often. Adriana was not offended. Who would want to communicate with a sad person? She was disgusted with herself. For a long time going over a piece of cloth, which her grandmother had accumulated quite a lot. It was as if the girl was having a conversation with her favorite relative Adriana. It seemed that only in this way she would be able, if not to forget about the hardtack, then at least to reduce it. One evening, having lost track of time, the girl completely forgot about the rules of safety. When she heard the doorbell ring, for some reason she immediately decided that Kelly, whom she hadn't even seen today, had come to see her. Her friend had warned her that she couldn't make the class because of personal matters and had probably dropped by to tell her something. Eventually, Adriana opened the door without looking through the peephole and was surprised to see an unfamiliar young man with a box of cake in his hands on the doorstep. The girl muttered, "You must be mistaken," and began to close the door. However, the man did not allow her to do so and surprised her with an unexpected revelation. "Hello, Adriana, how mature you are. I see you don't recognize me. Well, I'm not proud. I'll introduce myself. My name is Benjamin. I'm your own grandfather." The girl grinned wickedly, remembering what her mother had told her. "Well, he's more like family. He left Grandma when your daughter went to school, and as far as I know from my mom, he only visited a couple times. So Benjamin, have a nice day and goodbye." The man put his foot on the threshold so that Adriana couldn't slam the door in his face as she intended, even if she wanted to. And in a stern tone that sent shivers down the girl's spine, he said, "You granddaughter do not get hot. The apartment partly belongs to me. I never divorced Miranda. She probably didn't bother with that formality. She didn't file for alimony. So, dear granddaughter, excuse me, move over and let me pass." Stunned Adriana, using all her strength, managed to put on the door chain and shouted to the uninvited guest, "I'm going to call the police now." "Just so you know," the man only smirked. "Call all you want. It's even better that you make sure I'm telling the truth. I'll treat them to cake. I'll tell them that my granddaughter is the only one who won't let me in. I have a specialty cake from my childhood town. I'm sure the cops will love it. I'm just afraid it'll frost a little, so you'd better hurry them up. Tell them it's urgent. Grandpa wants to treat you. Go ahead, I'll wait for you here." The man took his foot off. Adriana slammed the door shut, locked it, and froze in doubt. Really, she would call the police now, and what would they say? "Come, because there is a relative unknown to me under my door. He does not threaten, does not attack. Thinking, the girl moved away from the door just in case and dialed her friend's number. Briefly explaining the situation to Kelly, Adriana asked, "Help me out. Your cousin seems to know someone in the police force. Ask him, if it's not too much trouble, what should I do?" "I got it. Don't worry. Give me 10 minutes and wait for my call." Kelly called her excited friend back, even a little before the announced deadline, and happily informed her, "Wait, we'll be there soon, me and backup. You will open the door only after I tell you to, understand?" Adriana gave a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Kelly. I owe you one." The girl tiptoed towards the door to see what was going to happen, and soon she heard the low voices of men. It was hard to make out who was talking about what, and Adriana was cursing herself for insisting on good noise insulation during the renovation. However, she didn't have to suffer for long. There was a knock at the door, and Kelly, parodying a cartoon character, said, "Owl, open up. The bear is here." Then she added in her own voice, "It's okay." Adriana let in her friend, her cousin Kevin, who she knew a little, her grandfather, who had shown up out of nowhere, and a strange man. Kelly introduced him. "Adriana, this is Christopher. He's one of the best lawyers around. He will help you resolve the matter with the least amount of effort." The man bowed his head and spoke in a pleasant baritone. "Although under such unexpected circumstances, it's a pleasure to meet you. If you don't mind, why don't we all sit down at the table? Benjamin will calmly state the essence of his claims, present the documents he has. If it's not too much trouble, Adriana, I'll ask you to prepare the receipts for the rent for the last month or any other month. It's not too important." The lawyer's voice mesmerized the girl. She was even glad of her grandfather's sudden intrusion because this mishap had led to a pleasant acquaintance. While Adriana went to the other room to get a receipt, Christopher had time to study the passport that the girl's grandfather had given him. He held it out to Kevin. "Look with your own eye. Something marriage stamp looks strange to me." Kelly's cousin, having scrutinized the stamp, began to photograph all the pages of the passport. Benjamin raised an eyebrow in surprise, but did not have time to comment. The lawyer asked him an unexpected question. "What store did you buy the cake from?" The man even stood up, saying, "You can't buy such a thing here. In my hometown, the only bakery in my hometown bakes according to old recipes. I went in yesterday before I left and bought some." Christopher nodded in affirmation. "It seems we are fellow countrymen, Benjamin. Only I haven't been to my native land for about 5 years. Who's behind the cash register at the pastry shop? Same Aunt Camille?" With her eyelashes glued shut and her constant joke in response to complaints about the disorder on the counters. Benjamin nodded. "She is." The lawyer rejoiced as if he had been told the most joyous news. "We must go and see how the deceased woman trades. Yes, jokes about jokes. Tell you what, Benjamin, or whatever your name is, Aunt Camille's been in the ground for 15 years. I doubt you're related to Adriana. Even if you were, according to the receipts she's kindly provided for the last 6 months, you're not even registered here. You have no right to this property, and if you think to sue, only wasting time and money. So my advice to you is to get out of here and don't let Adriana see you again. Otherwise, don't even doubt, I will find an article that will bring you to administrative or even criminal responsibility." The elderly man, upset, grabbed his document with surprising impudence and went to the exit. Adriana shouted after him, "Take the cake back. I don't want anything from you." Benjamin did not resist or refuse and left the apartment, which he had not managed to become a full-fledged tenant. Adriana was overjoyed and agreed to let her rescuers go only after an impromptu feast. She sincerely thanked her friend, her cousin, and the lawyer who had so masterfully saved her the trouble, and asked a direct question. "Christopher, please name your fee." The man laughed. "Better just by name. I'm maybe 7 years older, and when people address me by you, I feel like an old man. And I think I've already paid for everything with my home-cooked food and this funny business." Kelly picked up the lawyer's laughter, laughing at the hapless imposter. "Nice work, Christopher. You got him." "Kevin, what did you take passport photos of this scammer for?" A cousin confessed. "Honestly, it was just to be on the level. I thought I'd scare him with it, and I think it worked." When the guests left, Adriana did not think that the strange incident would have a pleasant continuation. However, the next day Christopher came to her in the morning, brought coffee and a cake from a rather status coffee shop, explaining, "This is as a sign of apology for the fact that yesterday the cake could not be tasted." The girl thanked the lawyer and, feeling a little awkward, offered to have breakfast together. During the conversation at the table, Adriana had the feeling that she had known Christopher all her life and that he understood her from half a word. They even had the same musical tastes, which was not the case even with Kelly, who couldn't stand rock or classical music. Adriana was not even surprised that communication with Christopher had become a necessity for her. A real addiction. Once during another date, the man reluctantly, as if embarrassed, shared with the girl a difficult story of his life. He said that he was married, and after the divorce moved from his hometown to the metropolis where he once studied. "That's how I lived until I met you," worked, rented an apartment near the office, and never thought that I would ever fall in love so much. Adriana's heart melted from the tenderness of Christopher, with whom she felt like behind a stone wall. The girl once offered her favorite man to move in with her, and he agreed, and in confirmation of the seriousness of his intentions, gave a thin ring as an engagement ring and proposed to get married closer to summer. Can you imagine what a beautiful ceremony could be organized? No, winter has its charms too, but it's impossible to organize an extravagant photo shoot in nature. And I want you to remember our wedding day forever. With Kelly, Adriana now saw her almost exclusively at work. One day, entering the tiny office, which they proudly called the coach's room, she found her best friend in tears. "What happened? Did you get hurt? Should I call a cab to the hospital?" Kelly shook her head. "I'm just sad. No one wants me." Adriana marveled. "Come on, I need you." "Don't worry, you have practice in an hour. Everyone will be waiting for you there. Don't be sad." Kelly cried, "You don't even have time to hang out with me now. I have no one to go dancing with, no one to hang out with. I'm so lonely." Adriana tactfully did not ask where the mysterious bow had gone, from which her friend's eyes shone so brightly, and offered her, "You know, let's sit at my place tonight. Christopher said he's gonna be working late. He has to go somewhere. You and me, we'll relax. We'll set up a beauty parlor at home, some masks, peels." The girls were in the middle of a merry conversation when Christopher returned to the apartment. He said hello to Kelly, kissed Adriana, and after thinking about it, invited the girls to an Italian cafe. Since that evening, the man also began to take an active part in making sure that the friend of his beloved did not feel neglected and lonely. On weekends, the groom took the bride and her friend to a country park hotel for a picnic with kebabs, or he rented a cottage at a camp where they could go skiing and snowboarding. Adriana was genuinely glad that her friend had stopped shedding tears. In addition, in business things also went afill. The girls even opened a branch of the studio without hesitation, entrusting all the paperwork to Christopher. Adriana, dreaming that soon her favorite will take her to apply. In advance, she found out the schedule of the wedding building, all the formalities, details, and waited for the fateful day to come. However, the man was alert, affectionate, but although the last spring month has already passed the middle, he did not talk about formalizing the relationship. Probably, Adriana for some time would go, as they say, in rose-colored glasses, and did not suspect anything. But one day, during a joint dinner, she had to leave the company of her fiancé and best friend to talk on the phone with the mother of one of the girls engaged in the studio. Returning to the table, Adriana almost caused a scandal when she saw Kelly move to her rightful place, kissing Christopher. The deluded bride had to summon all her self-control to almost calmly report, "So, Christopher, as far as I'm concerned, you're moving in. So give me your set of keys. I'll put your stuff together and let you know when you can pick it up." "Kelly, I want my apartment keys back too." However, the friend was not embarrassed and, rummaging through her purse in a completely calm tone, reported, "Anyway, I'm glad it's all finally cleared up. Yes, Christopher and I are together now. But let's not make a tragedy out of it, okay? I don't want our business to suffer because of any resentment you might have. Be professional, Adriana. I know it's going to be hard for you to see me, so I suggest we stay away from each other temporarily until you cool off. I'm afraid you'll suddenly have steam coming out of your ears." Kelly smiled victoriously, pulling a bunch of keys out of her bag and taking the keys to the apartment off her carabiner. She continued to outline her ideas. "We'll divide the studios like this. The one closer to my house will be on me. You can safely conduct training in the branch. You'll pay the minimum rent, and you can keep half of the profits you make. The rest will be saved up in accounts for future development. I think that's reasonable and fair." Adriana was surprised. "Wait, Kelly, are you kidding me? Why should I have to pay rent and profit? I'm just as much an owner as you are." Christopher tried to calm the girl, who had just not only abandoned, but thanks to her gullibility, deprived of a very significant part of the income. "Don't scandalize. People are already looking at us. Kitten, you gotta understand, it happens. Don't blame yourself. You're a wonderful person, a talented and beautiful girl. You'll be fine. Let's be friends, okay?" Kelly agreed with the man. "Yes, Adriana, let's civilize our relationship under new circumstances. I think you're being overdramatic. Of course, as a dance coach you're unrivaled, but in business, I'm sorry, you don't know anything. Who signs papers like general powers of attorney and amendments to bylaws without looking? Christopher and I will be running the business. You do what you do best. Show me how to dance." Adriana remembered that she had actually signed a few sheets of paper without even reading, believing only Christopher's oral retelling, and flared up. "So, having actually knocked the ground out from under my feet, having taken away the joy of doing what I love, you're trying to look like a benefactor. Oh, good for you. But you should know that I will not give up. I will study all the documentation very carefully and will not let you wipe your feet on me." Grabbing her purse, Adriana ran home, not looking back at the calls to stop that the traders shouted after her. In the apartment, she ran from room to room, from bathroom to kitchen, grabbed the Christopher things she saw, and threw them on the bed. Then she tied the corners of the bedspread crosswise and hauled the unexpectedly heavy knot to the door to toss it over the threshold. As soon as her ex-fiancé arrived, finished with clearing the apartment of Christopher, Adriana rushed through every piece of paperwork she had at home. The more the deceived girl was immersed in reading, if necessary checking the meaning of terms on the internet, the more she was horrified. How naive she had been, how insanely gullible. How right her grandmother had been in saying that you can't trust anyone unconditionally. Such a blow from Kelly, whom she considered her best friend and fiancé. The girl could not imagine, even in the most nightmarish dream, the power of attorney that Adriana had given Christopher had played a very bad joke. The man, using her boundless trust, legally arranged everything so that the girl, in fact, almost no rights to the studio remained. She was now not the owner, but an ordinary employee and could not even arrange a vacation or set a convenient work schedule without agreement with Kelly. Adriana, of course, could quit even now, but decided to try to work at least a month to prepare the way out, to rent the premises and organize there a new studio, luring the maximum number of clients. Adriana didn't even talk to Christopher, who had come to pick up her things, and as soon as the bundle with his belongings was on the landing, she hurried to close the door. In the adored studio, Adriana now went as a hard labor. And after a week, the flow of clients noticeably decreased. Even regular students and pupils began to refuse from classes. Adriana blamed herself, thinking that the trainings lacked courage and the spark that ignites talent in people who are shy to dance. But one day, one of the first visitors who became a regular opened her eyes to what was going on. It turned out that Kelly brazenly simply lures customers to her hall, not bending any methods. The most harmless lie of her former friend was the allegedly random news that Adriana was going to leave, and therefore she, of course, did not have time for classes. Thanking for the valuable information, the girl said goodbye to the visitors and went to the coach room on unbendable legs. She wanted to take her things quickly, and having reached home, to cheer herself up. However, she decided first of all to write to her former friend that she was quitting, and she immediately fulfilled her intention. The reply message that arrived in the messenger on her phone completely knocked Adriana out of her rut. The picture was a decorated vignette, an invitation to the wedding of Kelly and Christopher, and with a mocking column +1. Before the girl could catch her breath, another message arrived. We really want you not to be mad at us and to share our moment of joy. The uniforms are dressy. Kelly and Christopher. Adriana was in shock. What had she done to humiliate her like this? Why were the people she considered her support now pushing her into the abyss of despair? Had she misjudged them so deeply? The girl did not know what to do, but clearly understood that in such a state alone in any case cannot stay. It is necessary to be somewhere in the middle of people, so that the sinful thought of the most terrible way of solving problems does not get into her head. The girl went to the nearest park. There are a lot of people there, and at the same time no one invades personal space. If Adriana's state of mind could influence nature, the leaden gray sky would be pierced by lightning. People who were going to hide from the weather would have been slapped in the face by prickly rain. Wind gusts would have torn off the roofs of street cabs. Except that everything was almost exactly the opposite. The mood of one poor humiliated girl changed nothing. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, the young greenery on the trees gave a pleasant open-work shade, and the park looked excellent. The unknown florist obviously tried to create a magnificent landscape, and he had done everything with a soul. The park was much cozier than Adriana remembered it, and she sat down on a bench to try to disconnect herself from all the excitement that had nearly brought her to the brink today. She felt like she was performing on stage, and once again the music disappeared. Only this time the girl had no idea what kind of dance she was doing, and in general, what kind of melody was playing. The only thing left to do was to freeze in confusion and desperately try to figure out what to do next. Right in front of the place where the girl had settled down, there was a late variety of proud tulips, which looked, if not the winners in life, then definitely the masters of the flower beds. I wish I had their self-confidence, Adriana thought. Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a man's voice. Hey, why are you crying? Adriana, who didn't notice she was crying, wasn't going to talk to anyone and didn't answer the curious stranger. He left, but soon returned and sat down next to the sad Adriana. The stranger had an ice cream cone and a fluffy cloud of cotton candy in each hand. The man began to patiently explain to stop the girl, who was about to jump up and run away from him. Don't be scared, Adriana, but it just so happens that I know you, even though we don't know each other. I work for a private investigator who was commissioned by your grandmother to work on solving your parents' elimination. Since we seriously feared that the villains would use any means to obstruct justice. So I was assigned by my boss to keep a discreet eye on you. So you could say that you have been my ward for several months. The girl took a closer look at the man. He might have glimpsed her once, but she couldn't be sure of that. The stranger, smiling, introduced himself. John, an employee of the secret private agency. After introductions, the man handed Adriana both a cone and cotton candy, explaining, "They said in the movies that ice cream seemed to make you feel more cheerful, but I thought it was unlikely you had a sore throat, so I got you some cotton candy. I, for one, love cotton candy." Adriana was in a foul mood, and she answered John not very kindly. "You can enjoy it. I try not to eat any of those types of sweets." The man smiled. "Well, no, so no. Really, I can't eat that much myself. Wait now, I'll treat those boys who are counting change at the kiosk, and I'll be back." I don't know why, but Adriana obeyed and waited for John. The assistant detective asked, "You can consider it a professional interest, and if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to answer, but I'll ask you why you're crying on such a beautiful day in this beautiful park." Adriana grinned and decided to share her distress. It might have been a lovely day if it hadn't been for one thing. Today, 2 traitors have taken to inviting me to a wedding. My ex-fiancé is going. What was it called? To solemnize my marriage to my ex-best friend, and it's a mock invitation for 2 people. They know I don't have anyone to go with. They're mocking me. It was as if the man knew exactly the unmistakable path to her heart. He even used a perfume exactly the way she liked, with a top note, lemon, and a persistent trail of vetiver. Not an obvious choice for a serious, successful lawyer, as Christopher seemed to be. In addition, several times Adriana noticed that he contemptuously wrinkled his nose when she danced to the tune of his favorite band, although he claimed to adore their work. When asked why the man's grimaces flickered on his face, Adriana, as it seemed to Adriana at the time, answered about a sudden colic or a headache. Closely examining her memories of the recent past, the jilted bride discovered more and more oddities. Coming home, Adriana was already convinced that Christopher, having previously learned as much information about her as possible, did everything to gain her trust and settle in her apartment as a fiancé. Admittedly, he had succeeded with ease, but what was his goal? Adriana kept no cash in the apartment. A sewing machine, fabrics, leftovers from the family jewelry collection. That's all the valuables the girl had. Driven by an unaccountable fear, Adriana checked the stash. A pair of antique earrings and a ring were in place. The girl calmed down a little, but the next morning, taking the jewelry, went to the bank to put them in a safe deposit box. After all, she had no guarantee that Christopher had not acquired a duplicate key. Besides, Kelly could have done it too. After visiting the bank, the girl planned to call a locksmith to change the lock, just in case. So, after signing the safe deposit box agreement and placing the jewelry in it, she decided to withdraw the accumulated interest from the account in order to have cash on hand. However, an employee of the financial institution shocked Adriana with the news. "I'm sorry, but according to your power of attorney, all the funds were withdrawn from the account yesterday." Trying not to shout, Adriana clarified, "Can you tell me who I gave the power of attorney to? Can you look at it?" The employee did not refuse the strange client and gave a name that Adriana did not expect to hear. The money from the account was taken not by Christopher, as the girl supposed, but by her former best friend. Thanking the operator, who asked if everything was all right, Adriana went home. It was suddenly clear to her as daylight that it was Kelly who could so accurately orient Christopher about all her likes and dislikes. It wasn't enough that her best friend didn't know about naive Adriana. It was at her behest and at her instigation that the man managed to appear in the image of an ideal. She believed in incredible harmony and love at first sight. Now there was a lot of explanation. And the fact that Kelly had pressed her pity, cursing her loneliness, was also part of the plan. Surely in inviting her to the wedding, the traitors must have been up to something devious too. Perhaps someone would be involved in the robbery of the apartment, while Adriana, swallowing tears, would say congratulations. After all, her friend knew for a fact that she still had her jewelry, only that she never told her where the stash was located in the house. Adriana did not go to the police about the theft of money. After all, Kelly technically had power of attorney, and there was no doubt that it was quite real signed. The master replaced the lock in the door, and the girl felt a little calmer. However, she couldn't relax completely. Deciding to take advantage of the insomnia for her own good, Adriana began to think about an outfit to make a spectacular appearance at the wedding of the people who had so despicably betrayed her trust. Barely waiting for working hours, the girl appeared in the office of the agency's secret. Following the clues, sitting near the turnstile guard, she found the door, on which hung a sign with the name of a recent acquaintance, and knocked and entered. Before John told the girl the information he had gotten, she confessed, "You know, I guess you were right. Christopher was instructed by my best friend. She took money out of my account by proxy, by the way. But it was my fault. I signed every piece of paper my fiancé gave me, my own fault." John confirmed it. "Yeah, I was able to talk to Kelly's cousin Kevin. He's probably the most innocent element in this scheme. In my opinion, he was used. He's a big guy, and his main task was to scare the guy who introduced himself as your grandfather." Catching the surprise on Adriana's face, John explained, "It was a well-thought-out production. Kelly, as I understand it, knew the basic information about your family. Christopher had found an actor to play Benjamin. You'd only seen your grandfather in old photographs when he was young, and there was no fear of exposure. The crooks wanted to get rich, and as I understand it, they almost succeeded. I think they didn't invite you to the wedding just to make fun of you, but with the same vested interest. You caught them unexpectedly, and he just didn't have time to bring the search of your apartment to its logical conclusion." Adriana nodded. "I've come to roughly the same conclusion. I just have a few questions bouncing around in my head. Why would my best friend, the one who'd been there for me in my most difficult moments, suddenly decide to betray me? Why would she treat me this way? It's not like we've never even had a serious fight." Don speculated, maybe banal envy or greed. Those are usually the main motives behind most crimes. Adriana's face even stretched a little in surprise. "Originally, my family wasn't much richer than Kelly's, so it's definitely not greed. And as for envy, it wasn't her envy of me. It was my friend's envy from the moment my parents died that drove me crazy." Imagine Kelly being able to play checkers with her dad, hug her mom, and have secret chats with her. I was overcome with envy. What can I say? I still get that feeling now. Maybe she's getting back at me for being jealous. I don't think so. Anyway, I don't know what to think. I'm in a lot of pain right now with everything that's going on. One thing I know for sure, I will definitely go to the wedding to these traitors, if only to look at Christopher and Kelly to clarify why they did such a despicable thing to me. The assistant detective, he explained. Christopher's motives are pretty clear. He was driven by greed. He has so much debt in his hometown that he's got to call the shots. Lawyer, he is quite mediocre, but his habits are such that the average fees cannot provide. He had addictions too. He got out of town by swindling several ladies out of large sums of money. Ostensibly going to get married, took money under plausible pretexts and quarreled. He was treated in a private clinic in our city, giving doctors for his rehabilitation almost everything he had from knave girls was. Now you're back on the trail of the fortune hunter. Don't worry, we'll fight to get you back your dance studio and your money. But don't make a big deal out of it just yet. Christopher and Kelly might just run away, and I'd like to see them get a fair shake. Adriana began to thank the man. John sighed. I've been able to find so much information on Christopher these days, it's amazing. He seems to be far from stupid. In terms of all sorts of not quite honest methods, a real master, but apparently overconfident and too much. Do you want me to tell you right now all the machinations he's pulled off in our town? Or you'd better wait, and then you'll see everything at the wedding. Though Adriana wanted to know everything at once, she answered after a moment's thought. I think I'll wait. I don't want to get deeper into this mess right now. I've had enough of what I've learned so far. There's only 2 problems left. What to wear and who to go with. I'm working on the first one, but I don't know what to do about the second. John, why don't you keep me company? Don't think I'll pay for the escort, because it's a separate job. The man shook his head negatively. No, I'm not suitable for a spectacular appearance. My appearance is standard, unremarkable, to be honest. Well, you'll come with me on your arm and what? Your detractors will enjoy the first moment. They'll think something like, didn't you manage to persuade anyone better? If you're gonna take a swing at them, you gotta hit them hard enough to make their mood go away. Listen, I think I know just the guy for your date. If it works out, that'd be great. And if it doesn't, I'll keep you company, of course. It may not be the most stunning exit, but I'll give you some great information. Adriana agreed with John that they would meet half an hour before the time specified in the invitation to the wedding and agreed on the place. After saying goodbye, the girl went to the needlework store to buy accessories for the planned outfit. She had only 2 weeks left to create a stunning dress. Not the smallest amount of time, but the idea wasn't too simple either. Adriana was nervous and had stabbed her fingers with a needle several times, sweeping the details until they bled. In order not to cry from resentment and pain, the girl remembered her grandmother's words that the things sewn with such incidents will turn out perfectly. She didn't have to rush to work, and she missed her classes, but she wasn't going to bow to Kelly and ask to go back. Adriana was warmed by the thought that it was likely that the studio would soon be in her possession again, although her gullibility was already failing her. The girl trusted that John would be honest with her. On the day of Christopher and Kelly's wedding, Adriana looked truly dazzling. She looked like a flame of flame both in color and with muddy associations. The top of the dress was adorned with a bold, asymmetrical neckline. The skirt, with its high slits at the seams, swayed playfully as she walked, revealing nothing too much, but perfectly stirring her imagination. Adriana herself knew she was irresistible in this dress. But John's praise was gratifying to her. By his quite ordinary clothes, the girl realized that her companion would be someone else. And she was incredibly surprised when the man who had once tried to impersonate her grandfather approached her and the assistant detective. He embarrassingly introduced himself. James, an unemployed provincial theater actor. Well, necessity forced me to play the part of a confidence trickster. Pardon me for deceiving you, if you can. Adriana's heart was pounding as before an important performance, but she took James by the arm and walked with him to the restaurant rented by the traders. At the entrance, Kelly's parents suddenly met her and her companion, who greeted their daughter's friend very warmly and looked at her companion with undisguised interest. The bride's mother cordially invited, "Oh, Adriana, how glad I am that you have come. Come in there, almost everyone is already assembled. Have fun, relax, be happy for Kelly and her fiancé. Such a fine man. I hope you get lucky one day, you deserve it." Adriana was having a hard time with this conversation, and as if sensing this, her companion squeezed her hand a little harder. Kelly's father admired the way his daughter's friend looked, receiving as a reward a disgruntled look from his wife who dragged him along. "Have you forgotten? Where did the steward direct us? Come quickly, I'll see you, Adriana." Almost at a run, the woman dragged her husband along with her. When Adriana and James crossed the threshold of the banquet hall, the girl noted with satisfaction that Kelly and Christopher were frozen like statues when they saw the guests. The bride and groom did not look happy at all now. Somehow, having mastered their emotions, they waved to Adriana and her companion. Kelly reached for the groom's ear. She asked, "What's that alcoholic doing here? You said he'd get the money he was owed and go someplace where no one could find him." "Christopher, I'm scared. I'm afraid that Adriana has thought of some terrible revenge." Christopher hugged his fiancée, pressed her against him, and answered, "I don't think she's got anything serious on us. It's just a similar person." Adriana has a good visual memory, and she probably guessed that Grandpa didn't show up on her doorstep by accident, but that I would have gotten to her quickly and without suspicion. So she decided to annoy us. You might say, to poison the joy of our happy day. She thought about it, reconstructed what this supposed Benjamin looked like, and hired someone. There are plenty of actors in this country who dream of an easy way to make money. So relax, Kelly. Adriana and her companion tried to behave as if nothing had happened and not to stand out among the other guests, either by excessive joy or even more so by frowning. Thanks to the lady hostess, they found their table almost instantly and sat down quietly, waiting for the start of the party, which promised to be very unusual. Adriana was pleased to note how anxiously Kelly looked at her, and meeting her gaze, smiled as happily as possible. She had absolutely no idea what kind of surprise John had prepared, and was excited about the promised surprise. At the signal of the host, Kelly's parents brought a huge loaf into the banquet hall, and the fun began in full swing. Guests congratulated the newlyweds, who can do what they want. The bride's parents sang a duet song. The aunt on the groom's side organized a long presentation of small souvenirs to rhyming lines. Adriana was getting more and more anxious, but James reassured her. And when the hostess announced their turn to congratulate the newlyweds, the man whispered quietly, "Well, Adriana, here we go. Leave it to me to speak, and you listen. Be glad that in time about the real essence of the former fiancé learned." Coughing dramatically, Adriana's companion, carefully supporting her, took a seat in the middle of the hall. The experienced actor didn't even need a microphone. His well-practiced voice, surprisingly, without losing its sonority after years of libations, was heard in all corners of the hall. "So, ladies and gentlemen, Ladies and gentlemen, Madam and Monsieur, I suggest we turn our attention to the screen. The hostess turned off several rows of lamps, and the room became much darker. Suddenly, to the sound of Mendelssohn's March, racy images showing the groom with other women began to appear on the screen. And James accompanied the changing images with brief information about the names of the groom's lovers. When he came to his senses, Christopher tried to shout out the unexpected guest and convince everyone else that the image on the screen was a photomontage. But a seed of doubt had been sown. Kelly, it seems, was completely unaware of such an amorous nature of her fiancé. And after the photo of Christopher in the company of Adriana flashed shots with herself. And then the unusual movie continued with the participation of other ladies. Kelly slapped her fiancé and started yelling at him, not embarrassed by those present. "Ashhole, you told me we'd cheat on my Adriana and live happily ever after. You got me to help you take the dance studio away from her. And you're telling me you were only seeing me for profit. Why didn't I think to follow you? You decided to get married. Then what were your plans? To run away with the money you gave me and take over my business? I hate you." Finally, the demonstration of the unfaithful Christopher on the screen came to an end. The lights came on and John entered the hall accompanied by police officers, explaining, "Unfortunately, the festivities will have to come to an end. The main culprits of the celebration are suspected of fraud." Kelly's parents rushed to the law enforcement officers who explained that there had been a mistake, but the police were adamant. Christopher and Kelly were handcuffed and led to the exit. As the ex-girlfriend approached Adriana, the girl asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you do this to me? I always thought you were someone I could trust." Kelly groaned and said, "You always got everything without a problem. First places, inheritance, even the students are drawn to you, not me." Adriana was shocked. She tried to figure out if Kelly was being sincere. Had she almost ruined her life really because of jealousy, as John had suggested? Kelly spat angrily and confessed, "You've always been the best, ever since sports camp, and I've been a pale semblance of you. You know what I'm going to tell you? I hate you. Ever since I saw you dancing. If you must know, I'm the one who tried to ruin your performance. I'm the reason the music stopped playing during your dance, but it all turned out to your advantage." Kelly paid no attention to anyone around her and looking into Adriana's eyes informed, "The only times I've ever been really happy. Do you know which ones?" Adriana remained silent, afraid to even speculate, and Kelly grinned crookedly and continued, "I was ready to jump for joy when you were suffering. Oh, it wasn't easy to hide my joy, to act sympathetic." Kelly tried to throw herself at Adriana, but it was not easy to do it in handcuffs. The police officers led the detainee away. Adriana remained standing in the middle of the hall. She had yet to face her ex-fiancé, but he passed by with a glance at her neckline. Adriana asked after him, "Christopher, aren't you ashamed?" But the man didn't even turn around. John, who approached Adriana, said softly, "Such people are not ashamed." At the request of Kelly's parents, Adriana did not claim the money withdrawn from her account, and the compensation received in the amount of this amount invested in the development of her network of dance studios. The situation with her ex-girlfriend and ex-fiancé was a great life lesson for her, and she was distrustful of the idea of dating that John had expressed. An assistant private detective, it took about 3 years for Adriana to finally believe in the sincerity of his feelings.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Kathy was born and raised in a rural family. Her mother worked on the farm all her life. Her father worked as a driver. Kathy and her sister Christina rustled around the house from a small age, cleaning, cooking, tending to the livestock. Parents didn't have time. They earned money. They came home tired in the evening, and their daughters looked after them. They would set the table, pour tea, and carry clean towels after washing. It was the order of the day then. Kathy dreamed of being a teacher from childhood. Perhaps her first teacher played a big part in that. It was a beautiful, very intelligent young girl, barely graduated from the institute. She spoke competently and calmly, knew the answers to all questions, and skillfully motivated the class to successful study. She had no laggards. Even the weakest tried and stretched to please Mrs. Anna. Kathy remembered crying when her favorite teacher's practice was over and she went home. She hadn't been the only one upset. Since then, the girl had firmly decided that when she grew up, she would become a teacher, as good and kind as Ms. Anna. So Kathy never changed her mind. She studied well and, having finished school, easily entered the university. Life in the city began to get strange. That meddles, a room in the dormitory. It was so unusual. The girl had never been separated from her parents and sister Christina for longer than a couple of days. And here it was all of a sudden. It was scary and hard at first, but Kathy quickly got used to it. She liked her studies, her classmates, her teachers. The girl realized more and more clearly. She had chosen the right path. Being a teacher is really her calling. After receiving her diploma, Kathy got the first job in her life. She was taken in the local city school, also in the prestigious language gymnasium. And the salary offered such a young girl could not dream of. Kathy plunged headlong into her work. She liked everything and to teach, and answer the numerous questions of her kids, and write notes for lessons, and deal with interesting and difficult cases for the pedagogical council. A young specialist was noticed and appreciated. It was nice to receive compliments from experienced colleagues. Kathy felt really happy. Christina, her sister, had also moved to the city by then. Graduated from the College of Economics. She got a job at a meat packing plant in the administrative office. Even got married, and very happily. James, the son of the director of the plant, fell in love with the pretty young employee. He was from a wealthy family, handsome, educated, witty. Perhaps his parents were at first against the bride's misbehavior from the village. But after recognizing her, they grew to love and accept her. Of course they did. Beautiful, hardworking, faithful, kind. The young lived in their own apartment, which had 3 spacious rooms and a huge loggia. This miracle was given to them at the wedding by James's parents. Kathy was sincerely happy for her sister. But her personal life was not going well. Back in her university days, Kathy had several failed romances. They all followed the same pattern. First, the girl became enchanted with the next suitor. She began to see him as an ideal man. Prepares in her mind for marriage. Then came the epiphany. Wearing heartache and almost disgust to the one who recently was the meaning of life, Kathy. For some reason, her beau turned out to be infantile and spoiled creatures and egoists, not independent, weak. No, with such Kathy could not connect her life. Bitterness, disappointment after each breakup remained for a long time. That's why Kathy decided to take a break. Well, these men, they're just frustrating. It's better to get down to work on her career. And then, one day in the life of a young teacher appeared he, Andrew, a modest, even a little stiff and short guy with blue eyes and a nice smile. For the first time, they sought each other in the school gym. On the eve of September 1, Andrew was leading a team of craftsmen who were hurriedly finishing the school renovation. The young men met their eyes. Kathy immediately realized that this man hooked her something. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. He was not so handsome, quiet, and unremarkable. And he flared to the roots of his hair at the sight of Kathy and turned away, embarrassed. It looked very sweet and touching. Kathy realized that he liked him too, at first sight. Then Kathy met Andrew every day, and he invariably hid his eyes from her. But the girl began to notice that the guy secretly looks at her when he thinks that she does not see it. And it was very pleasant and exciting. And one day Andrew suddenly gathered courage. It was already on the eve of the handover. One last chance to get to know each other. Job done. Andrew has nothing more to do at the school, so he'd never see Kathy again. So the boy decided to take a desperate and difficult step. Andrew spoke quietly and just no florid phrases, but his speech was so sincere, so touching. Kathy, of course, melted and agreed to go out with the guy. Andrew did not even realize that she had been waiting for this invitation for a long time and was beginning to worry that she would never get it. And what to do then? She wasn't going to hang herself around his neck. Andrew invited Kathy to the movies. The girl was not worried before the first date. She could see that she really liked Andrew. She felt warmth coming from him and therefore was sure that their meeting would go as it should. If only Andrew would relax a little. He's very shy. After that first date, Kathy realized that Andrew was completely her person. They were so good, so easy together. Both told each other about their lives and destinies. Andrew was raised by his grandmother. His parents died when the boy was only 6 years old. So there he was left with his paternal grandmother, who was already a very old woman. She was an old school lady and believed that children should be brought up in strictness, especially boys. So Andrew's childhood could not be called happy, warm, and carefree. No, the boy didn't complain. He just told me how he grew up and grew up. This is Kathy, sensitive and attentive Kathy. She drew her own conclusions. She felt sorry for this wonderful boy. She wanted to hug him, kiss him, to give him some warmth and care. I mean, that's all he needed. When Andrew was a kid, he went into the army after school. Then he came back, trained as a welder. But he didn't get a job in his profession. But he became a foreman. Repair crews are also bread and butter. Still, the boy never gave up hope of becoming a welder. And the wages are better there. And he'd studied so much for a reason. Andrew lived in a rented apartment, just like Kathy, when he was just a kid. Clever relatives had sold the parents' house, the boy's orphanage. There was no end in sight, so the boy had to start from scratch. But he was not discouraged and did not complain about life, although fate treated him rather unfairly. Andrew was very kind and caring, unlike Kathy's previous beau. He always wondered if she was hungry, and on chilly evenings he threw his jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm with Andrew. The girl felt loved and desired. He seemed to be willing to do anything for her. It was a wonderful feeling. Kathy realized that she had fallen in love, and the feeling was completely mutual. There wasn't even any doubt. Andrew looked at her with such eyes and tried so hard to do everything to make her feel good around him. It was impossible not to notice. Kathy was not surprised when Andrew proposed to her. And of course, she had happily accepted right away. She had wanted to live next to Andrew for a long time. In one apartment, they would take care of each other, support each other, and it would be more fun together. Kathy was tired of returning to an empty, cold room. Christina was not at first delighted with her sister's choice. You're young, you're pretty, you could easily find someone more wealthy. How many friends does my earring have? They're all handsome and sons of wealthy parents, and they're like cheese in butter. What about this Andrew? Nikolai is not yard, not work normal. But when she recognized Andrew, the best Christina changed her mind. You have a good one. Smiled her sister, shared her impressions with Kathy. Very kind and loves you very much. You'll do well together. You'll achieve everything. You can't miss out on a man like that. I'm so happy for you. Andrew and Kathy got married. They lived in his rented apartment and Kathy's golden years began. The young husband tried to help his wife with everything. He did a lot of things for her, and even as he had dreamed, he found a new job. He got a job as a welder at a construction site, took part-time jobs, did not refuse the opportunity to poke around, as he was going to get his own apartment. Andrew dreamed of buying a 3-room apartment in a prestigious neighborhood where there are a lot of good schools and playgrounds, so that his and Kathy's future children had a happy childhood. Andrew often made surprises to his young wife. He would give her a ring for no reason, or just come home with a bouquet. Kathy felt the happiest in the world and thanked fate for sending her such a loving and caring husband. The young couple talked for hours and discussed movies and life stories, friends and relatives. They made plans. Sometimes they argued. Not without that, but they always came to a compromise in the end. They liked the same movies and books. They both discovered new and interesting things about each other. For example, with Andrew, Kathy got into hiking in the woods. Andrew, thanks to his young wife, loved the theater. Kathy was sure that she and Andrew were soulmates, halves of one whole. Even though the couple lived poorly, they had enough to live on. But both excesses like a luxury car or annual trips to the sea. There was no speech yet, but both were happy with what they had each other and often discussed that chance meeting at school, which might not have been. Take Kathy, a vacation in August, as her superiors had suggested to her. And then Alex was born. How did the young couple rejoice at his arrival? The new father was glowing with pride, taking his son Andrew in his arms for the first time. He turned out to be a wonderful parent, attentive, sensitive, caring. He could spend hours after work driving around with the stroller to give his young wife a break. But Kathy most often went for a walk with her husband. It was so pleasant to walk together with Andrew, holding the handle of the stroller and in a low voice, so as not to wake up his son, to talk to the man you love about everything in the world. The young parents liked to make plans for the future of their apartment. They still didn't have one. But the amount in the bank account was slowly but surely growing. Just a little bit more, and the couple will be able to afford to buy their own home from Christina's sister Kathy. At the same time, their daughter Helen was born. Young moms often went to visit each other and together learned the wisdom of caring for babies. The sisters shared advice, discussed the successes and failures of their babies. Kathy felt truly happy, and her husband is so loving and understanding. And her sister is close by. The young couple often dreamed about how their son would grow up. Surely he will be smart, kind, brave, will become, perhaps, a scientist or a master of all hands. And they and parents will try to ensure that the innate talents of their child to open and gain strength. It is only necessary to be attentive and patient. Andrew planned to study a lot with his son, to support him and always be there for him in a difficult moment. Kathy was glad that it was easy and calm at heart. The two of them and cope, raise a child a good man. But the dreams of the couple were not destined to come true. A few years after the birth of their son, misfortunes one after another fell on their small family. First came the financial crisis, as a result of which the couple's savings depreciated. They were only a few days away from buying their own apartment. The goal was so close. But after what had happened, the money accumulated in their account could only buy a couple of winter jackets. And that's if you're very lucky. Alex was already in daycare. Kathy was out of maternity leave. The couple took it hard. They even cried. I don't know what to say. Andrew couldn't help but cry. He thought his wife couldn't see, but she saw everything. The man even looked for an apartment he'd been dreaming of for a long time. Spacious, 3-room, not far from a large school and the Palace of Sports, where Alex could do swimming. And then such a blow. But there was no time to indulge in despondency for a long time. Hard times came. Salaries at Kathy's school began to be delayed for months. Things weren't going too well on the building site either. Andrew's main income now came from coven members. The man spent days working part-time jobs to feed his family. Time passed. Alex was growing up. It was time for him to go to first grade. The family seemed to adapt to the new conditions. Andrew was allowed to stay afloat. The man again made plans for his own apartment. There were hopes for a better life. A happy future loomed ahead. And then tragedy struck at the construction site. Andrew was working unofficially. The owners of the facilities saved money on everything and didn't care much about safety. Andrew knew he was taking a risk, but he was always careful and acted as carefully as possible. But this time, on the construction of a supermarket building, the man fell off from the height of the 3rd floor right onto the concrete blocks piled piles and below. Of course, Andrew did not survive. Arriving in an ambulance, doctors had only to state the man's death. Kathy was not told the terrible news until the morning. For her, the whole world turned upside down in that second. She could not even cry for a long time. The woman felt her soul and heart literally torn in half. She didn't want to live. How and why get up in the morning if there is now no nearest and dearest person? Kathy realized that she would never meet someone like Andrew again. There was no one else like him, and she didn't need anyone else. She missed his smile, his look, the smell of warmth. It was physically painful to not be able to hug a loved one. There were his things around him: clothes, books, glasses. But Andrew himself would never come home again, would never hug her and her son, would never joke with them. How to accept that? To dull the pain, Kathy even took up the bottle. Kathy realized, of course, that this was a road to nowhere. But at that moment, she didn't care, just as long as she could get rid of the unbearable pain for a moment. There's no telling what would have happened to the woman if it hadn't been for Christina. She took Alex in for a while. She saw that his mother was not able not only to look after the child, but could not even cope with herself. Kathy didn't care. She took Alex, and that was fine. And she didn't even think about her own child's feelings at that time. But he was also in pain and scared. Strange as it may seem, Alex's illness brought Kathy back to life. He caught pneumonia and went to the hospital. Christina came to her sister in tears to tell her what had happened. She felt guilty. She hadn't looked after her nephew. He had a high fever and was delirious. The doctor and I thought it was stress at first. After all, the father's dead and the mother's in a state of confusion. But then it became obvious it was more serious than that. He was in intensive care for 24 hours. He seems better now, but the doctor says it's too early to relax. And your drinking, it's a threshold to get back into life. You can't go back. Now we're going to lose another boy. This situation brought Kathy back to life. She was more scared for her son than she'd ever been in her life. She pulled herself together, stopped drinking. She got her job back. And of course, she became a caring and loving mother again. Every day, Kathy went to visit her son in the hospital. At first, she stood under the windows, and then, when Alex was allowed to go out, she walked with him for hours on the hospital yard. Alex grew up immediately. Trouble had turned a 7-year-old boy into a little old man with sad eyes. He was surprisingly thin, pale, and silent. Looking at her son, Kathy realized that he was under deep stress. Her baby is traumatized. He needs a strong mother. And she, Kathy, took risks to remove drowned in her own grief, forgetting about the native man, so much in need of her support. Kathy has been the perfect mother ever since. Attentive, totally focused on her son, caring. In the city, Kathy couldn't hold on. It was too expensive to rent an apartment. The woman didn't make that much money. She had to return to the village. Father was already gone, and his life was taken away by a heart attack 2 years earlier. And my elderly mother was in great need of support and care. It was already hard for her to cope with the household on her own. So Kathy's move came very well. Alex went to the first grade of the village school. Kathy got a job there as a teacher, but soon she had to think about changing jobs. The salaries in that school were very different from the salaries. In the city gymnasium on such crumbs simply could not live, and Kathy had to pull the child alone on his feet, to put him on his feet. And then a neighbor, Aunt Nura, offered a good auction. Her nephew had a point at the central market in the city. He sold clothes and shoes and accessories. He needed a salesman, someone decent, someone he could trust, a salary. Aunt Tyrin, the nephew, promised a good one. He also offered a percentage of the proceeds. 2 by 2, Kathy was also quite satisfactory. It was hard, of course, to part with the dream job. After all, teaching kids is Kathy's true calling. The woman knew from childhood what she wanted to be. But what can you do when times are so hard? They've got to eat something with Alex. What wouldn't you do for a child? With great regret, Kathy left school. She missed her students, her coworkers, and her school life for a long time. Her heart sank every time she saw uniformed children on the street. But Kathy was facing new realities. Working the market was hard. Capricious customers who themselves do not know what they want, scandalous traders. Competitors, heavy financial responsibility. And the road took a lot of time and effort. All the same, in the days when Kathy went to work, she had to get up neither light nor dawn and walk almost 2 kilometers to the nearest stop, through which the bus to the city. But the paycheck was good. Now Kathy could buy her son and beautiful clothes and toys. And even to the sea, they flew to the resort every summer. And her mother helped to look after her son. She was already, of course, very old. But she had enough time and energy for her grandson. Kathy often went to visit Christina. She did not work, was busy with the house and her daughter could afford. Her husband earned enough to provide for the family. Christina often felt sorry for her sister. How did your fate turn out? You work like a horse, spinning as hard as you can. I even feel awkward about being a housewife and you. Everyone has his own fate, sighs Kathy. I'm not complaining about mine. We all have something for nothing. Kathy was genuinely happy about Christina's life. She adored both her sister and her niece Helen Christina, but her daughter. The 4 of them often went out together. They'd go out together. All in all, they lived close together. It was Christina who advised Kathy to save some money and invested in shares of a large company. James says it's the right thing to do. We have a lot of money invested in those stocks ourselves. My husband's sure it'll be great in the end. And James is smart, he knows. Kathy listened to her sister, and without saying a word to anyone. She bought a few shares. The capital grew, but it was impossible to get rich very slowly thanks to such interest, as it seemed at first. But Kathy decided to let the money lie on deposit. But she did not tell her son or her mother about the shares. I don't think they'll approve. They'll say it's all a waste of money. Let the family live in peace. So Kathy had her own little secret. Now she was saving money, buying stocks, saving for a happy future for her son. Alex grew up a smart, athletic boy, unlike his modest, quiet father. Alex was the soul of the company. He always had a lot of friends, comrades. The guy walked a lot, laughed, socialized. He was a very cheerful and carefree person. Kathy, looking at her son, was happy to see what kind of a guy grew up. Confident, brave, smart. This was exactly the kind of son she and Andrew imagined when they walked around the neighborhood with a stroller. Alex dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but to enter the cherished faculty he lacked just a little. The guy had to go to the army. Returning, he decided to try his luck in the city. His mother supported her son's decision and even helped financially. She rented Alex an apartment. Go, try, dare. Just be careful and know that no matter what happens, you can always come home to this house. Thank you, Alex smiled. But I'm not going back. I'm going to make my way in the city. There are so many opportunities there, so many prospects that something will work out. Goodbye, smiled Kathy. It was scary to let her son go, but what can you do? The boy had grown up. It was time for him to start his own life. Alex enrolled in a construction college and at the same time got a job at a factory. He studied, worked, and paid for his own apartment. He often came to the village to visit his mother and grandmother. He always showed up with gifts and funny stories. Kathy's mother had completely given up. She hardly ever left the house, and sometimes she didn't even recognize her own daughters. One day she had a heart attack. Kathy called an ambulance. Mom was taken to the hospital. The old woman never came back. What do you want, age? The doctor sighed tiredly. No one is eternal. Kathy and Christina organized a funeral in the village. A lot of people gathered for the wake. After all, everyone here knew Mom. Then Christina told her sister to take over her parents' house. I don't need that half of the inheritance. I don't need it. You know I don't. What about you? You took care of your mom the last few years. That's hard work. So it's only fair that you get the house. Kathy didn't mind. She really needed her own place. Old age was fast approaching. The woman was sometimes surprised at how quickly her life flew by. It seemed that she and Andrew Alex had just been born. They were young, full of plans and hopes, beautiful. And now Alex is a grown-up, independent man. Andrew is not, and she herself is almost an old woman, that ahead only pension and quiet, peaceful existence in a village house. The only hope is in Alex. Here he will get married. His grandchildren will be born. The kids will come to visit their grandmother. Then the joy in life will appear. By the way, Alex is a good man. He did not give up his dream of law school. He He got in after all. It was hard for him to work and study, but he'll get through it. Kathy, if anything, will help and support him. Christina said it was time to live for himself. You're young, you're still beautiful. Alex has grown up. Now you can treat yourself. Your salary is not bad. You even have savings. Let's fly to Italy or Greece. You've never been abroad. We'll take a walk there and have a vacation. What, Greece? What, Italy? Kathy smiled back. I have a grown-up son, Ivan, will soon get married. Probably he will need to help with the wedding and the apartment. That's what I'm saving up for. I don't have time for a vacation. Your son is a healthy, grown-up man. He's so strong and handsome. He'll manage on his own. You have to think about yourself sometimes. But Kathy didn't agree with her sister. She likes to talk easily in front of her husband like that. And Kalenka was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. She has a future for 100 years ahead planned and secured. True, the nephew was good, despite the rich parents, and grew up wise, modest, judicious. Simple, such a natural, pleasant, very independent too. Like Alex, she's been working since she was young. Golden girl. When Kathy had argued with her sister that Alex would need her support for the foreseeable future, she'd been right on the money. Shortly after that conversation, the son came to visit his mother for the weekend. He was mysterious, not as he always was. Kathy immediately realized that something was wrong. The woman quickly set the table and put out her son's favorite treats: fried potatoes with mushrooms, pancakes, and pickles from the cellar, and then watched with pleasure as Alex absorbed it all to satiety. The young man shared with his parents an amazing news: Mom, I'm getting married. As Kathy splashed her hands, went on, the calm questions fell from her like from a cornucopia. The woman is filled with a mass of emotions: joy, of anxiety, surprise. Her name is Julia. You're gonna love her. I'm bringing her here next weekend. You two should get to know each other before we get married. Just wanted to warn you first. Kathy nodded her head with a smile. She knew, of course, that this moment would come sooner or later, but still found herself caught off guard by the news. But wow, Alex is getting married, all grown up. Julia worked as a waitress in a cafe. The guy often came to eat at this place. That's how they met. Julia's from the country too. The son shared details. She was raised by a single mother too. See how much we have in common. Julia came to the city to go to law school. Another amazing coincidence. She dreamed of working for the police, helping to catch criminals, but she's so frail, so thin. What kind of policeman would she be? Julia didn't make it. She failed her college exams, but the girl did not want to return home to the village. What would she do there? She grew up in a small, remote village in a poor family. Her mother had 5 younger children besides her. Julia didn't want to go back to her old life, so she got a job as a waitress in a cafe. She rented a room in a dormitory and lived on her own, working slowly. How long have you two been together? 6 months almost made Alex smile. From that smile, Kathy realized that her son was head over heels in love. She's nice. Takes care of me. She cleans the house. She cooks. I mean, we've been living together for 4 months in my rented apartment. I proposed to her the other day. That's how Kathy got through. It's how much to prepare, and the dining room for the wedding to order, and outfits for the bride and groom to find and host, hire, and menu. Think through, and the invitation to send out to moms. We decided that we can do without all that. Just answered Alex. We'll sign everything quietly in the registry office and everything as you want, nodded Kathy. She had painted in her head the image of a perfect wedding for her only son a long time ago. It was a cheerful celebration with a crowd of dressed-up guests, a ringing toastmaster, a huge cake, and a table full of treats. Cars decorated with balloons and ribbons, dancing, a beautiful bride and a happy groom. But since the young people decided differently, so be it. It's their holiday after all. The following weekend, Alex arrived at his mother's house with his bride. Kathy was confused, prepared a royal chair, and made salads and meat, spared from the appetizers, stacked on the composed. Kathy was very excited. She wanted to please her future daughter-in-law, to show Julia that she was very much expected in this house. They were preparing for the arrival of the dear guest. as long as not to say the wrong thing, so that Alex was ashamed of her mother. Then it didn't happen. Julia turned out to be a thin girl and not tall. Big dark eyes, thin eyebrows, and a spread of thick silk. She was dressed simply but tastefully. An elegant dress, low-heeled shoes. At first, the guests and the hostess felt a little constrained. Julia, looking around carefully, was silent. Apparently, she was embarrassed to say a word. Only after a while did Kathy realize that this modesty was feigned. Julia was just looking around. She was choosing tactics of behavior, drawing conclusions. The atmosphere at the table was moving. Alex joked, amused his ladies, throwing up interesting topics for conversation. He was always so lively, energetic, companionable. In the course of the conversation, it became clear that Julia was indeed from a very poor and disadvantaged family. The girl charmed Kathy at the first meeting with her modesty. Bride Alex had a very sweet smile. And how she looked at her fiancé. In her eyes shone tenderness and love. The guy, however, answered Julia in the same way. He held her hand, now and then took her by the waist. There was love and harmony between the young people. Kathy looked at them and her heart rejoiced. Alex and Julia were married. Kathy suggested the young people to have a party in a cafe. All right, not a real wedding with a toastmaster and cars. But they could have a proper celebration with their friends. She even set aside money for it. Kathy had savings. Over the years, the woman managed to put aside a certain amount. Plus stocks bought on her sister's advice. They'd grown a lot. At first, Kathy dreamed of buying an apartment in the city, but then realized that in the village she lives well. Quiet, calm people, familiar and friendly around. Kathy liked the very atmosphere reigning in her village. Closer to retirement, the woman realized that she did not want to move anywhere. But she could. She had enough money for a small apartment. But never mind, her son could still use it. Only Christina's sister knew about the savings. Kathy didn't talk about her wealth, not even to her son. She wanted Alex to grow up independent, that he as a man, himself tried to earn money for housing and something to achieve in life. But it will not work out. His mother will always help him in a difficult situation. There are means only for the time being. He shouldn't know that. Let him make his own way. The money was in a bank account. Kathy had invested some of it in stocks a few years ago on the advice of her sister's husband, and the money was now generating a good income. For her son's wedding, Kathy had withdrawn from the account. The amount she had estimated would be enough for a lavish celebration. She wanted to give them a present. On her son's next visit, she handed Alex a puffy envelope. Wow, he was amazed. He poked his nose inside. What a surprise. Where'd you get it? I saved up, Kathy smiled. Make yourself a holiday like you want to go out to a restaurant with your friends. Don't deny yourself anything, have fun. Thank you, smiled Alex. But we better save this money for renting an apartment. Why do you need to rent an apartment and already earn money? And the wedding, it is in general once in a lifetime, only happens. Well, ideally, of course. I have problems with my job, Alex admitted. They pay pennies, and it's unstable there. I'm just in danger of getting sick. And Julia, that she does not earn enough. A waitress does not pay millions. It's okay. Kathy patted his grown son on the shoulder. Alex is all grown up. He's a big man himself, and his problems are just as grown up. Already financial issues sadden him. He's thinking about supporting his family. I feel sorry for him, of course. Yes, everyone goes through such things. Don't worry, son. When you finish your studies, you'll find a better job. You're my good boy. You're so smart and handsome. You'll be such an educated man. If you're such a man, they'll take you everywhere. They won't take you. Alex sighed even harder. I was expelled, as Kathy added. Why for truancy? Alex said quietly. Kathy was almost crying, son. In her dreams, she had already seen her son as a graduated lawyer, successful, competent, highly paid. And now, all of a sudden, it's news like this. Just like that. Alex looked at his mother with irritation. I had to work a lot, so I didn't get to classes. I had a lot of absences. I thought they'd come out. They didn't. So I got expelled. No big deal. Kathy pulled herself together. Alex needs a little encouragement now. You'll learn. Not the first and not the last. Yes, I do not want to finish studying. Alex got angry. I'm a grown man. I'm sitting in the pears, pants rubbing. It's funny. You have to earn money, not suffer with nonsense. Kathy did not argue with her son. Not in that. He was now in a state of nothing. Then she will change his mind. Education is necessary for a young man. Otherwise, you can't build a career. A woman is sure to convey this to her grown-up only child. Now it is necessary to support him, to calm him down, to encourage him. Well, if you don't want a wedding, do with this gift of mine. What do you wish? Nodded Kathy Alex. Thank you. Alex's mom smiled gratefully and happily. We could really use the money right now. We're happy to help. You're all grown up and practical. Others would be happy to spend money on a holiday. But you're thinking about the future? I have to, sighed Alex. The son left, and Kathy stayed home with a heavy heart. Alex was also worried now. He didn't finish his studies. No decent job, no place to live. Now he's getting married. If children will go, Alex will have to work at unskilled work from morning till night to provide for his family. And this is not the future Kathy dreamed of for her only child. He's a grown man, he'll figure it out. Calmed her sister Christina in the evening on the phone. What are you worried about? You've done everything I asked of you. It's up to him now. Maybe give him money for an apartment. I've consulted with anyone. It's easier. The young will at least pay for the rent. Let him pay. The older sister objected. Don't even think of mentioning that money now. They'll sit on their necks and weigh their legs down. But they'll try to climb up. Maybe they'll succeed. You can always give them the apartment. It's not time yet. You are right, you, Christina, are right completely, of course, grinned my sister. And you come to visit me. Tomorrow come to the movie with you, go to a cafe. Sit. You need to unwind. Again, Christina, you're right, smiled Kathy. What a blessing that she has such a sister. A close person who will always support and cheer up. Alex and Julia got married. The signing took place in the city registry office modestly and quietly. Kathy, Christina with Rudit, and two of Julia's girlfriends attended the ceremony. Then a small group of people modestly celebrated the events in a cafe. We sat only a little. We made a few toasts to the newlyweds, gave the newlyweds presents, and dispersed. Julia had to go on shift. Alex was waiting at work, too. Kathy stretched out disappointedly when she and her sister were alone. The women decided to do a little shopping. Come on, young people don't care now. Christina waved away carelessly. As long as they lived well. Did Alex live well with Julia? Kathy had no idea. The son tried not to talk to his mother about it. It was awkward for her to ask, to pry into the soul of an adult. The young people came to visit occasionally. Julia behaved politely, but coldly and aloofly. Kathy noted that the young couple seemed to have a good relationship. Alex's job was not going well. He changed places and employers, looking for a decent income, but nothing worked out. Alex didn't want to think about going back to university. Kathy several times wanted to tell her son that she had a safety cushion, which she was ready to give him. She wanted to encourage Alex to take that desperation out of his eyes. But the woman delayed. We need to let the young ones try to get back on their feet on their own. It's important. It's not like they're so needy right now. Yes, it's hard. But they're two adults who should be able to cope. But if there's a child, then it's a different matter. Children should live in normal conditions with calm, peaceful parents. Several years passed. The situation in my son's family did not change. He was still looking for a job. Alex, from a cheerful joker of a joker, turned into a frowning man. Kathy thought it was because of money problems. But one day she accidentally witnessed a conversation between her son and Julia. The couple came to visit Kathy Petrovna. Lately it happened less and less often. The woman went to the kitchen to take out of the oven forbidden with apples goose. And when she returned with a tray in her hands, she managed to witness an ugly scene. You're just a lowlife. Julia looked at Alex with dislike. You can't do anything. Married Andrew. He gave her a cool phone for her birthday. And they're going on vacation to the Emery soon. And you can't even find money for a spa for the woman you love. We're about to be evicted from our apartment for non-payment." Alex silently lowered his head. He had nothing to object. Probably, the young man felt at this moment really full of nothing. Kathy's heart squeezed with pity for his son. Wow, Julia often humiliates him like this. Once when she was visiting, she couldn't help herself, and the son was too used to hanging his head. He wasn't even surprised and didn't even try to defend himself. Julia's a real piece of work. He's so modest and pretend at first. And herself. Kathy had a hard time pulling herself together. You can't show your true feelings about the situation. In fact, she must pretend she hadn't seen or heard anything. Her interference will only spoil everything. Julia will then have the opportunity to call Alex a little son. But of course, she's going to give her mother-in-law a run for her money. That's for sure. No, let them deal with it themselves. They're adults. For the rest of the evening before the young ones left, Kathy stayed neutral. Talked on distracted topics, smiled at both spouses, and tried not to notice the sunken sadness in her son's eyes. When the children left, many things became obvious to Kathy. Alex is head over heels in love with Julia. That much is clear. He's willing to go to great lengths for her. He tries, he fights, but he can't get anywhere. Largely because Alex never finished his studies, and he didn't finish his studies just because of Julia. The guy has to work hard to provide for his lover's needs. Kathy got herself back. You have to be objective. It was still Alex's choice to drop out of university and get a job. Yes, a lot of it was out of a desire to please Julia. But Alex made the decisive step himself. How to help his son now? Kathy thought again about the money in the account. Should she give it to Alex? Let him buy an apartment. Julia would be delighted. She approves. In serious matters, Kathy is used to consulting her sister. Jana called her. "You're crazy," Christina exclaimed after hearing her sister's reasoning. "Under no circumstances do not buy an apartment now. Don't you realize that it will be considered as jointly acquired property in marriage? They've only been together a week. What if they get a divorce? Julia would take half of it without blinking an eye. I understand if they had kids. Then at least the grandkids would get everything. And now it's going to someone else. You worked hard. You didn't earn money for this spinning your tail. Oh, it's hard being the mother of a grown son." Kathy sighed. She realized her sister was right again. So many nuances to keep in your head. It's not easy being a mother at all, her sister parried. But it's nice sometimes. A few more years passed. Kathy saw that her son was unhappily married. Alex was still looking for a decent living. He did all sorts of things, and Vaktang, and already worked, and tried to open a business, and worked as a trucker, but nowhere for a long time. What was going on? The company went bankrupt, or he didn't pass the medical examination. Finally, Alex gave up. Tired. It's hard to work and be disappointed. One day he came to his mother suddenly, unannounced, alone. "We are not pulling the life in the city," he sighed. "It's expensive for us. We'll come back for the first time with you. We'll live. You don't mind?" "No." Shook her head in surprise. "That's good," nodded Alex. "In that case, we'll come next week." Kathy was at a loss after her son's departure. Are they going to live together here in the village? What kind of a strange decision. There are no jobs here. What Alex and Julia are counting on. But the woman did not argue with her son. She saw that he's already having a hard time. All right, let them try. They are probably just looking for a way out of a difficult situation. They're also considering a life in the countryside. Well, we can do that, since the city didn't work out. Life together with Alex and Julia began with the division of territory. "Mom, we will live in the living room," said Alex. "Why?" Kathy was surprised. She had prepared for the young corner of her bedroom. In her opinion, it was the most cozy room and remote. The young people would live more quietly there. Living room, Kathy liked to rest here watching TV, and the neighbors often dropped by. There was plenty of room in the living room for friends. Because it was the biggest and brightest room, Alex answered simply. Then Kathy realized that her son was broadcasting Julia's will. He always tried to please his wife in everything. He loved his young wife more than his father's life and took advantage of it. Julia immediately showed her true face to her mother-in-law. Did not even try to pretend anymore, polite or modest. She didn't like everything Kathy did. And her mother-in-law didn't cook right. Too fatty, unhealthy. And the server's table was sluggish, wrong. And she didn't even know how to mop the floors. Julia would often admonish Kathy with a look of contempt. That it's you who rattles the dishes in the morning and disturbs your sleep, or are your friends laughing too loud? Couldn't you get together somewhere else in the evening? At first, Kathy was at a loss for words at her sister-in-law's insolence. Then, of course, she thought of appropriate responses to Julia's barbs. She wanted so much to remind her that she was not in her own house. Accordingly, she should behave more modestly. But Kathy lingered. For her son's sake, of course. The woman saw. Alex is very attached to Julia. He loves her, idolizes her. The young husband tried to fulfill his wife's every whim. There were many whims. The man failed and felt guilty. Julia was suspicious of elegy, this feeling of guilt. Often she mentioned husbands, boyfriends, her acquaintances who overpowered the women they loved with jewelry and literally overwhelmed them with money. Kathy understood the purpose of what was being said. Julia was manipulating Alex, played on his feelings, used her spouse to suppress him. But she wasn't even trying to open up to her son. He's not in the right state of mind right now anyway, too blinded by love and passion. Kathy sincerely did not understand what her son found in this Julia. Well, yes, she was pretty, but there's a lot of them out there, and now you're getting these feelings. It seemed that if Julia asked him to jump off a cliff, he would do it gladly. Alex got a job at the local sawmill. The work was hard, physically exhausting, but the pay was good, enough to take Julia into town from time to time, then to shopping, then to a restaurant. The young wife herself didn't bother to work. Well, where can I find a suitable place here in the village? She sighed. And in the city, every day do not go to the city. I traveled, Kathy suddenly remembered. I had no husband, no child to raise. So I drove from here to the central market every day. Why are you comparing times and situations? Julia sighed languidly. First of all, I am married, fortunately. After all, the responsibility for the material maintenance of the family lies on the man, not on the woman. Secondly, we are in no hurry to have children. I believe that it is silly to give birth to Beskov without a yard is terribly irresponsible. And thirdly, I'm going through such a period now. Do you think it's easy to work as a waitress on night shifts? To tolerate the antics of customers? I need to recuperate, get back to my old self. Kathy could have said a lot of things to her daughter-in-law, but she kept quiet. She kept quiet for her son's sake. He was having a hard enough time as it was. And now he's going to be caught between his mother and his wife, like between two fires. Kathy was well aware that her daughter-in-law was openly condemning her life. And this Julia to give birth to children without a stake, without a yard is irresponsible. I mean, that's a stone to her head. When did she and Andrew have Alex? The young family didn't have their own place yet. That's what the daughter-in-law was implying. The longer the young lived at Kathy's, the clearer the woman realized Julia manipulates Alex, makes him dance to his own tune, uses the spouse. The son is the one who is in love with the young beauty, put on the other in front of his eyes and left the spouse. Turns this situation in his favor. Julia herself clearly does not nourish a colleague any tender feelings. This is evident from her irritation, her dislike of the other look at the spouse. According to gestures, yes, a lot of them, these indicators, and how only the son does not notice. So why is Julia still with Alex? The answer is simple. Who else would work so hard for her? Where else would she find someone so loyal and obedient? Such a feeling as Alex has for Julia is rare, and the girl understands it perfectly well. She will try to make the most of the situation. And if suddenly there will be a more interesting option, she will easily leave Alex. Being confident in her own power, Julia behaved rudely with her mother-in-law right in front of Alex. The daughter-in-law must have realized that Kathy could see right through her. It was infuriatingly annoying and frightening, apparently. And how did Julia look at her mother-in-law? She felt superfluous in her own house, arrogant, full of contempt. Looks, shelves, remarks, reproaches. To have less contact with her daughter-in-law. Kathy now went to visit her neighbor herself. She also often traveled to her sister's house and even stayed overnight. Christina, of course, advised to put the initial Julia in her place. It's your house, after all, shook her sister's head. Remind her of that. Let them think about it now. Tell them you were separating. You were looking for a place to live. Otherwise, she's living on her own, and she's got a lot of nerve. I'll talk to her myself, if you're uncomfortable. No. Kathy waved his hands. No way. Alex is always on her side. It's hard enough for him. He didn't need to add to his frustration. Alex really did blindly believe everything his wife said. Kathy tried to be as polite as possible. I kept silent in response to her nibs, remarks. My sister-in-law uncomplainingly cleaned her plates. Tolerated her reproaches. But Julia, apparently, still complained to her husband about his mother, put in an unsightly light. Mom, why are you picking on her? Sometimes the son would start a conversation. Julia is a wonderful woman, I love her. You mustn't think of her as an enemy. Try to make up with her. I didn't have a fight with her, Kathy tried to justify it. I'm trying not to talk to her at all. Any conversation turns in her direction, and she makes me her number one enemy. That's what it's all about. Alex shook his head sadly. Julia says so you despise her, or do not notice, or come to reproach. The third is not given. Why do you make her work in the kitchen? Julia was going through a rough patch. She needed a vacation. So I just reminded her to clean up her plate. No one's making her work. I serve you myself. Alex looked at his mother with a sad look, and Kathy realized that everything is useless. He still will not believe that his wonderful Julia systematically turns the life of her husband and mother-in-law into a nightmare. Maybe he'll get to Alex someday, but not now. Julia masterfully turned Alex against his own mother, against the person who sheltered the couple in her house, gave them shelter, who, in fact, feeds them. Since Alex earns pennies at the sawmill, and the lion's share of his salary goes to pay off loans. In the city, the couple had managed to rack up loans that they now had to pay off. It was frustrating and painful. Kathy saw no way out of the situation. She only hoped that Alex would sooner or later see the light. Sometimes she wanted to kick the insolent youth out of the house, but that would mean losing her son forever. Julia manages to turn Alex against his mother on the spot. And here, if she throws them out of the house at a difficult moment. There's a lot of drama to be had here. Shakespeare would be jealous. And this house, to be honest, belonged to Alex when her mother died. Kathy suddenly realized that such things usually happen suddenly. Yes, Mom was sick. She needed help, but there was no sign of her leaving so soon. Kathy thought about it a lot, because she might one day be gone just as suddenly. And then how would Alex be left with? The inheritance was 6 months away. Suddenly some other claimants for this house will show up unexpectedly and heirs. My father had a complicated relationship with his relatives. Anything's possible. To protect Alex, Kathy, who was at that time the only owner of the house, wrote a gift deed to her son, and that was it. Her soul was at peace. Kathy was used to living for her only child. She did everything for him. Now the house officially belonged to Alex. And the son knew it was true. At the time, Alex thought he wouldn't need the inheritance. He planned to settle down in the city, buy a nice apartment, that he's some country house. Who knew it would turn out like this? Kathy decided to be patient. It cost her a lot of strength to keep her temper in check and not take it out on Julia. And it wasn't good for her health either. But for the sake of her son, she could bear it as long as Alex was happy. If not for Christina and her sensible advice, Kathy would have spent all her savings on an apartment in the city for young people. But her sister was right. The woman understood that now more than ever. Julia doesn't like Alex. It's obvious. She's using him. If Alex buys an apartment, which will be considered jointly acquired property, the young spouse will immediately demand a divorce, and she will legally take half of the housing with her into her new life. And this is very good money. Well, no, we'll not wait, Julianka. Alex won't be blinded by this strange love for ages. Someday he'll see the light. That's when he'll need an apartment in the city for his new life. Too bad he can't get out of the house for free. Kathy had to put up with the antics and unfair reproaches of his sister-in-law. There was no end to it, but the woman understood. Now she's in no position to change anything. Christina, seeing that her sister was having a hard time, suggested we go on vacation together. Why don't we dispel all Kathy's phone calls and go sunbathing? We'll swim in the sea. We'll go on excursions. They'll be great. Go for it. In the end, Kathy gave in. She really needed a break from everything that was going on at home. Young people, let them live in the village house. Julia would have to cook and clean. They've spoiled her. Doesn't even help with the plate. She sits at home all day and the phone hangs out and watches soap operas. Julia, of course, expressed her opinion about Kathy's vacation. There is no money in the family, and some people go to resorts. She replied, somehow to Alexa's remark that his salary has been cut again. But here even the man who had angelic patience and in love with his wife could not stand it. Julia, what do you care? Mom earned it, she has the right. What about us? We have never been anywhere with you, and we'll make money. I promise. Kathy hid in her room without saying anything. She didn't have time to get into an argument with her sister-in-law. Things don't pack themselves. It had been a wonderful trip. Kathy and Christina rented a house in a small village by the Black Sea. The sisters walked a lot, swam in the warm waves, sunbathed, went on all sorts of excursions. Kathy once took a risk and realized an old dream, took a ride on a hydrocycle with a young and reckless driver. The spray in the face, the dizzying speed of the endless sea surface. So scary and so much fun. It's never been at the same time. What's their sea and excursions? The sisters even went to discos at night and danced as in their youth. Do not despair. Thank you, Christina, for pulling me out. Sincerely enjoyed, Kathy. I feel like I'm 10 years younger. By the way, that's exactly what it looks like. Christina smiled. You look better, more rested. You look great. And so it was. For the first time in years, Kathy liked herself in the mirror. She had a fresher glow. And most importantly, there was a sparkle in her eyes and life and energy in her face. Kathy felt that she had left behind all the problems and the cranky, demanding daughter-in-law, and the unsettled son, and the endless squabbles in the kitchen. There was a powerful reset. The woman felt strong, beautiful, and energetic. The world seemed bright and welcoming. Only good things were thought of. One day, the sisters came late and admired for a long time unusually large stars and bright yellow moon, which left a clear path on the sea surface. Beauty stretched out Kathy. It certainly was, agreed Christina. It's a shame, only to go back tomorrow. I can't believe it. I love it here so much. Another life, another world. It's back to the same old thing. It's driving them away. Christina couldn't take it anymore. Sitting on your neck and getting hard. She's sad. She'll wait for me. I'll come and clean up your mess. Don't. The Ataman protested. It will make things worse. There's no need to make things worse, grumbled Christina. There's nowhere else to go. Good evening, lovely ladies. A low, pleasant voice came from behind them. Both women shuddered with surprise and turned around. In front of them stood a man, slim, trim, with elegant gray hair on his temples. He was charming and had a very friendly smile. He was wearing jeans that went up to his knees and a loose black t-shirt. In all this, the stranger looked very stylish and attractive. And hello to you too, answered for the two of them Christina. Wonderful evening, isn't it? The man kept approaching. Kathy could not take her eyes off his smile. It made the stranger's face seem to glow. The man introduced himself as William, said he had just arrived here today, and checked into a room on the second floor of his sister's cafe. Just today, they were having dinner in this place, drinking wine, eating kebab, enjoying live music. William immediately noticed two beautiful, single ladies at the table and followed them to the shore. I apologize if I startled you. And don't think I'm a frivolous adventurer. It's just that you both have such kind smiles. I just wanted to get to know you better. I'm here all by myself. I'd like to find some company for socializing. If you don't mind. There's a problem with that. It's Christina's fault, she shrugged. I mean, we're leaving on a plane tomorrow at lunch. That's a shame. The smile slipped off William's face for a moment. Kathy was also sorry they wouldn't have the chance to get to know the man better. Surely it would have been even more fun and exciting for the three of them to spend their vacation together. There was something about William, something special. Kathy wanted to be near him, to look into his eyes, to admire the man's smile, to listen to him. Strange, the woman didn't remember anything like that happening to her in the last 30 years. And had it ever happened in her life at all? Well, if that's the case, we have one night left. William was smiling again. So let's make it a fun night to remember. I come here a lot. I'll show you places to see. You're coming with me. Kathy was ready to say yes right away, but Christina's careful. Christina, unlike her sister, didn't lose her head around the charming stranger. It's like we're seeing you for the first time, she smiled embarrassedly. I don't want to offend you, but it's right to slap yourself on the forehead. William. Of course, there are all sorts of lunatics and criminals nowadays. Of course you're wary, and so am I. Let's just walk along the promenade then. There's a lot of people here. I don't want to part with you. That's the way to humor Christina. Kathy realized her sister was pleased that William was not offended. It was a wonderful walk. The sisters and their new acquaintance chatted and laughed without ceasing. Turns out William lives in New York and has his own business there, a chain of restaurants in the States. He's often there on business, meeting with winemakers, making contracts, shopping. Basically, he's growing the business. The man also told about his personal life, sincerely, without any secrets. He acted as if he had known Christina and Kathy for 100 years. William was widowed early. His daughter was only 9 years old at the time, and he never remarried because his daughter didn't want a stepmother living in the house. And the word of an only child was always law to William. You and Kathy are alike in that, Christina remarked. She too lives only with her son, tolerates a lot for his sake, allows him everything. Yes, William looked at Kathy with interest. The woman's eyes met his, and she flashed like a young woman. She even felt hot. That's a shame. Years later, I realized that's not the way to do it. My daughter grew up to be quite a spoiled brat, but she's doing well now. She found a husband who, like me, tolerates her whims and fancies, and lives quietly abroad, unfortunately. They've gone to a warm place, so I'm all alone. I have a job, friends, but still, after my daughter's departure, I feel empty in the house and in my soul. The trio partied until the wee hours of the morning, and it seemed as if they'd gone back to their youth. William clearly sympathized with Kathy. He tried to please her from time to time, taking her hand casually. Once he hugged her waist lightly and briefly. Kathy wanted that moment to last forever. The sisters reached their cottage only when the matchmaking began. William, of course, volunteered to see them off. I don't want to part with you, William confided. His eyes, of course, were on Kathy. Kathy, why do you blame the phones? Christina suddenly suggested. Why did we have such a good time? Why don't we come back again next year? We should call each other so we can have a vacation together. It'd be fun. That's obvious. That's a great idea. William says yes, I'm dictating my number. No, you better give me your phone number. Kathy complied with William's request with a smile. He deliberately held her hand in his as he took her cell phone. There was so much warmth from him, so much tenderness. Kathy wanted to dissolve into it all. It was a shame they had met so late. William quickly dialed his number from Kathy's cell phone. But there he smiled. Now we've exchanged phone numbers. We won't lose everything. Great, nodded Kathy. And she knew perfectly well that this phone exchange meant nothing. And the fairy tale that had almost begun would never really begin, because there was no tomorrow. Already today, she and anyone will fly home, and there again a cramped village house, a disgruntled daughter-in-law, a Willa's son. And the problems hadn't gone anywhere. While she was away. William, today he's been out with them. Tomorrow he'll find someone else. A man like that, he's not for her. He's too handsome, successful, wonderful. Where would she go with someone like that? Sad, of course, but the truth of life. Ah, how he looked at you, smiled Christina, when the sisters were left alone. "I wish someone would look at me with admiration someday." "Well, just once." "Oh, come on." Kathy waved you off with a smile. She knew that now she would often remember William for his soft voice, his delightful manners, his beautiful eyes. And let that man forget about her the very next day, it didn't matter. William, he played a huge role in her life, although he himself did not even realize it. Kathy did not reach her home until the evening. She and Christina had managed to nap for a couple of hours before the flight, but Kathy still felt tired and broken. Sleepless night, flight, acclimatization. The door was unlocked. Alex must have forgotten to lock the gate when he got home from work. He's been tired lately. And then there was Julia, who knows what she was feeding her husband while she was away. It was hard to imagine a daughter-in-law cooking borscht for her husband. The windows in the house were open wide. The steady hum of the television came from inside. The evening news was on. Kathy was about to enter the house with a smile. When she heard Julia's voice, she was obviously in the kitchen. How? Very simple. I was telling off someone who was obviously Alex. Now will appear soon. We will send her for milk. And while she walks, we'll put her things out of the door. It's no big deal. We've agreed 100 times. What are you worried about? Isn't that too harsh? Asked in an uncertain voice Alex. She's my mother after all. And this is her house. Not hers, yours. Julia argued. You showed me the deed of gift. And if that's the case, why should I put up with her here? I mean, she's been harassing me on and on and on. Alex, I told you, she's trying to break us up. But let me leave then, because I can't live in a house with your mother anyway. Okay. Alex mumbled conciliatingly. As agreed, so we will act. You just look, don't give any slack. We do everything right, you know? Standing up for personal boundaries. We're good. Kathy was standing under the window, dead or alive. It slowly dawned on her that she just overheard him talking, and that she was about to be kicked out of the house, and that Alex had agreed to it. There was no way the older woman had expected such a thing. She even had dark flickers in front of her eyes. Her blood pressure must have skyrocketed. Kathy took a few deep breaths to pull herself together, let on a joyful look, and entered the native hay. Oh, hello, lusciously, Julia smiled. And we were waiting for you a little later. A cab was rushing by. I didn't have time to look back, Kathy. I brought you some presents. Oh, what an experience. No sharing. Julia was doing her best to feign some sort of joy at seeing you. Alex stood next to her, slumped and silent. And Kathy perfectly understood the reason for her son's sadness. Of course, it's not easy for him right now. But he can't put his wife in her place. She has too much influence on him. Oh, Kathy splashed Julia's hands. You go to Anna for fresh milk, please. I have soup boiling on the stove. I can't get away. Alex is very tired from work, and I'm sick. If you are not very tired, then of course, nodded Kathy, and left the house, already knowing what awaited her on her return. It was a good thing she had overheard the conversation. She would at least have time to prepare for a serious conversation with her son and his wife. Her suitcases. Kathy spotted the porch from afar. They stood orphaned, leaning against the wall, waiting for their hostess. The hope that Alex would stop his wife's insolent behavior melted like smoke. The woman went up on the porch, knocked on the door. There was a note from inside. Julia's voice sounded. Read it, and you'll understand everything. Goodbye. I don't need it. I need your note, Kathy said. I want to talk to you. I want to look you in the eye. The door swung open with a bang. Julia stood on the threshold. She looked haughtily at Kathy. Well, look, if that's what you want. Julia, why are you doing this to me? I've tried to be your friend. Haven't I? You piss me off. A young woman has split. You're judgmental. Everything's wrong. Everything's wrong. You make your own rules. I don't feel like I own the place. And Alex is fawning over you. Well, this is my home, gently reminded Kathy. That's why it's natural for me to make my own rules. Julia exclaimed again. Again, you insinuate that we live in your house. It's not your house, by the way. It's not yours, it's your son's. So you're the one living here. Then get out of here. You have a good pension, enough to rent. Thank you. You even packed my things, Kathy said calmly. And it took a lot of effort to stay calm. Crying. She will when she gets to Christina. Of course, she'll go to her sister's. Who else? Only there aren't many of them here. My stuff is just clothes. What about photo albums? Old books, letters? And this junk is heavy, sighed Christina. We threw it out. Kathy gasped. It was as if she'd been punched in the solar plexus. It was her family's history, old photographs, letters from Andrew and her parents, postcards, diaries Christina and Kathy had kept when they were young. The first drawings by Helen and Alex. All of it carefully stored in boxes and folders, neatly arranged on shelves on a rack and in the bedroom. Really? Was there nothing left? Julia looked at her mother-in-law with defiance. What is this habit of clinging to junk? The insolent girl grinned. What good are these dusty papers? It's even easier to breathe without them. Kathy, despite her condition, suddenly had a great idea. She even had to suppress a smile so as not to accidentally give herself away to Julia. Soon she would no longer feel like the mistress of the situation. In a couple of minutes, the expression of smugness would evaporate from her pretty face. So you all threw everything out of my room. Totally. It's gonna be our closet now. All the boxes, every single one of them. Did you even look inside? Some of it was looked at, some of it was just thrown away. Why is Julia suddenly tense? Were there documents or what? The documents can be recovered in case of emergency. Kathy sank down tiredly on the porch steps. The blue shoebox was thrown away too. Yeah, probably, but what's the big deal? Kathy looked up at Julia. The blue box was my savings for the apartment I was going to give Alex. The words had an incredible effect. Julia stunned pale. She opened and closed her mouth a couple times to say something, then powerlessly sank down on the steps next to Kathy. Why didn't you warn me? She almost whispered. Kathy was pleased with the effect of the phrase. She didn't keep the money in any blue shoebox. It was lying quietly in her account. But Julia had to teach her a lesson for all those naughty things, which she did to both her and Alex. How did I know you'd decide to throw my stuff out of the house? I had no idea. The older woman stubbornly played the role of a confused and bewildered old lady. Julia shook her head as if she had woken up from a dream. Her eyes lit up with eagerness for action. You will tell me everything in detail now. What the box looked like. What shade of blue, was it big or small? Questions poured out of her sister-in-law like a cornucopia of questions. Kathy answered, trying not to get confused in her statement. The situation was beginning to get her down. Alex had stayed home all this time, never even poked his nose out on the porch. Probably he was ashamed of the fact that he had gone along with his wife and kicked his mother out of the house. But he couldn't go against his wife either. He loved her too much, which Julia took advantage of. After answering all Julia's questions, Kathy walked to the bus stop. Come on, stay, he mumbled to his sister-in-law. She now needed her mother-in-law to help her in her search. The young woman was determined to find the box, even in a landfill, even at the end of the world. And Kathy could help her find it. She knew what a huge amount of money looked like. Why would she? Kathy was a little surprised. What do you mean? Why should we? Now we have to look for the box of money together. You do care about your savings. Is that what it is? Kathy smiled. That's where you're wrong. I don't care what happens to that money. I was going to give it to you anyway. If you find it, take it. Kathy walked down the street and felt Julia's eyes on her. Her sister-in-law was shocked that she had thrown away so much money with her own hands. Yes, but now she'll be digging her nose into the ground just to bring that wealth home. Greedy Julia doesn't realize that Kathy's money is in a bank account. Her mother-in-law is not so dumb as to keep such funds in a box. Before heading to the bus stop, Kathy stopped by Jenna's neighbor's house. She'd been friends with her mother once, good friends, but now she was gone, unfortunately. Kathy still had a good relationship with Jenna. She needed someone in the village, someone who would tell her what was going on, keep an eye on Julia. And Jenna was the perfect informant. The woman had been outraged at first, listening to Kathy's story. She couldn't get her head around it. How could she do such a thing to a man who had let his daughter-in-law and son into the house when they were in a difficult situation? And then, recognizing it all the way through, Jenna laughed loudly and merrily. But Tamar, you guys, you've got to rub her nose in it like that. You figured it out. I'd like to know how they're doing. Kathy smiled. How are they living? How's the search going? Something tells me this story will open Alex's eyes to his wife. Oh, Alex shook her head, Jenna. I didn't think he'd be so weak-willed. Love is evil, Kathy sighed. Jenna had hit a sore spot in her heart. Of course I'll keep an eye on them. I'll get my Petya on board too. You know how quick he is? Peter. Jenna's son just turned 14. The kid's been using his phone to shoot content for his channel. And Peter seemed to be getting good at it. When Kathy was done with her chores, she went to her sisters. Christina would not leave her, would listen to her, support her, pity her. It was good to have such a person. Since the evening of Kathy's return from the resort, it's been 2 weeks. It's not a long time really, but in that time, a lot had happened. First of all, Kathy's plan had worked. Julia was hooked. She found out where they take the garbage from their village. She found the dump and now she went there every day as if to work. The girl was not employed anywhere and had plenty of free time, and Julia's trips to the dump were regularly reported to Kathy by phone by Jenna. She proved to be an excellent contact. Oh, Aunt Kathy. What a circus. She goes to the bus stop first thing in the morning. She's like a tourist. She's got a huge rucksack on her shoulders, overalls, gloves, bags. Everything is serious. And in the evening, she comes back tired, shot, angry. She smells like a motherfucker. Animals scatter. People cringe. It's like a circus. Tales of Julia's adventures don't stop there. Peter, Jenna's son, sometimes followed Julia, rode with the boys on bikes to the dump, and filmed videos of the young woman stubbornly digging through mountains of garbage. Kathy watched these videos on Channel 5. Julia scrupulously combed through the dump day after day without missing a square meter. It looked comical, of course. But Kathy was already feeling a little sorry for her almost ex-sister-in-law. Alex had filed for divorce. First, Kathy learned from the neighbors that Alex had left home. Then the son called his mother, apologized himself, repented, and at the same time informed her that he was divorcing Julia. She had turned her back after all, and him away with her obsession, money, boorishness, greed. We're getting a divorce, Mom, I can't stand her anymore. She must be crazy. Julia, let her stay at our house for a while. I gave her a week because she has nowhere to go. Julia keeps hoping to find money. It's become an obsession for her. She blames herself for not looking in the boxes I threw out. Eating on her own. She blames me too. It's unbearable. What are you going to do in the city? I finally found a good job with a place to live, which is important. But I'll have to travel a lot. But I don't care. But the money's good. After talking to my son, Kathy felt better. It is so important to be in touch with a loved one. Now between her and Alex, there are no conflicts and misunderstandings. And Alex's life seems to be getting better. He found a job from Julia, who used him openly, and is leaving. Maybe soon he will meet a good girl and will be happy in his personal life again. What are his years? Relationship with Julia will obviously be a good lesson for Alex. He won't fall into such a net again. At least Kathy really hoped so. The nicest thing happened in Kathy's life the day after she arrived at her sister's house. Christina, of course, had taken her in. They had a spare room in their apartment. Live as long as you like, Sis hugged Kathy. I'd be happy to move in forever. Kathy went to bed all upset. She still had no idea how she was going to live her life. In the morning, she got a call from William. The same casual acquaintance, so enchanted that the woman at the resort. He said that he couldn't forget their meeting, that he thought of Kathy all the time. Dreams of seeing her again. It was incredible. William. Kathy had never imagined that such a man would actually fall in love with her. But it seems that he did. William called and wrote often. They talked a lot, and gradually they became close, like relatives. Distant, yes, But still, Kathy felt that this communication was necessary for both of them. William expressed a desire to come to Kathy, but she suggested another option more pleasant. Kathy would fly to him herself because the atmosphere of a resort and a lush old country town are, as they say, two big differences. Kathy had the money for the trip that she had saved for her son's apartment. Alex, he earns his own money. Kathy has only one life, and one should enjoy every moment of it. The woman realized this when she retired, but better late than never. In general, Kathy was going on a long journey, went shopping with anyone, bought beautiful things, and felt really happy. True, she had one more thing to do before she left, not very pleasant, but urgent. A conversation with Julia. She'd had enough of being queen of the dump. Let her start a new life too,